All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me on this beautiful Thursday night. Might be Friday morning for some of you out east. Welcome. End of year. This is number 23 of the live streams. I can't believe I made it to 23. I know some of the podcasts that I listened to, somebody just had their 1,000th episode, and I thought about that for a second. I'm like, I can't even comprehend like doing 1,000 of these things. So the fact that we're even into the 20s for me is a pretty miraculous endeavor. So here we are. How's everybody doing tonight? I want to make sure before we kind of dive in that I've got good video, good audio here. I checked my Pro Tools audio before we went live. Well, before the camera came on. So I think we're good on there. I'm assuming with the thumbs up, we're good. All right. Before we dive in, a couple updates. I've been telling you guys about this production course that I actually did the production and filmed the session back in June of 2024. We actually did it before I left Vancouver and came to Nashville. So it has just taken so long to get through all the footage. We literally had like we had 3 cameras rolling for like 4 days straight. And then I brought all the session materials to my place, and I edited and mixed, and I filmed all of that, and I did screen captures of all of that. So like, talk about like just completely underestimated how long this was going to take to package and go through and get ready for you guys. But I see the light at the end of the tunnel. John and myself, John Plett, who I mentioned in the newsletter this week, has been like just kind of my glue. He's been keeping it all together at the seams throughout doing the live streams, the newsletters, getting this course going. Just kind of all things extracurricular for me in terms of, outside of just making records all day and all night. So, yeah, big thank you to John. We've been working quite hard on trying to get this thing ready. It is coming, I promise you. I've had a few questions about what exactly is kind of like the format, and the biggest thing I can probably tell you is it's a little bit different than maybe something like the Mix with the Masters or some of the other things that are out there on YouTube. It's significantly less tutorial based and more like fly on the wall. You get to be part of the session and see everything that goes on. And the reason why I did that was for a couple of reasons. First, the big reason is that's how I learned. I went to production school or engineering school, and I learned basics, but I didn't really learn that much. How I learned was by watching other people who knew what they were doing make records. And it wasn't that they were stopping and telling me what they were doing. And yeah, I could ask questions at the end of the session, but it was kind of observing and seeing kind of how everything went down. And a lot of the time in that scenario and in that environment, it's the kind of the lessons and the teachings in between what's actually happening. So it's less about, somebody showing you how to use an EQ, and it's more about, you seeing somebody using an EQ, and then all of a sudden it starts sounding really good, and you're like, oh wow, what just happened there? And then either after the fact asking some questions, or just even going and looking at the EQ and just like that kind of thing. So for me, I'm a big believer that that's a really great way to learn, and it's also there's a kind of a spontaneous factor that, because it's less canned and it's not like a lesson that's been laid out for you, you kind of don't know what's going to happen, and the session drives kind of how the whole thing goes. And there's a lot of things that I simply like, I would never even thought to explain to somebody if I was teaching them how to produce a record. I wouldn't even think to tell them something that when it happened in the session and then I'm seeing it on video, I'm like, oh my God, that's such a great lesson. I wouldn't have put that in the, the curriculum if I was developing a course that way. So it's a little bit different. I think you guys are going to dig it, and I think it's going to be extremely beneficial to, like I said, kind of go along with maybe what you guys have already seen in regards to the other stuff that's out there. It's a little bit different. And anyways, enough about that. If you're at all interested in that, make sure you go and subscribe to the newsletter on my website, because that's going to have the updates. We are going to still do the beta group, and that's eventually coming here, hopefully in the next month or so. Our goal was to have it done by the end of the year, but I just got so busy with projects that I haven't had time to really dig in. So, what else can I say? All the usual stuff. I don't know how many subscribers I'm up to on YouTube. I think I might be close to 5,000. So I don't know if we're going to reach the 5,000 by the end of the year, but if you know anybody who might be interested in this kind of content, be sure to send them a link, forward this over to them. Obviously, the more followers, the more likes, the more subscribers, all that stuff. It just helps kind of helps everything kind of churn along. It's an unsponsored show. We're just kind of doing this bootstrapping and kind of building it as we go, which is totally fine. So let's keep this thing going. Oh, somebody said here, 4.96 subs. Okay, we're getting close. I don't know why that matters, but you guys are here. And that's what matters. So let's dig in. I mentioned this a few times. If you guys want to participate in the chat, you have to be subscribed. It's kind of like a YouTube setting that I've put, because I want to make sure the people who I'm addressing and that are asking questions, they're really here to kind of be part of the community and be part of what we got going on here, and not just somebody coming in to talk shit. Although that's fun too every once in a while. Maybe I'll open that up and we'll have a talk shit session where everybody can just throw proverbial tomatoes at me. That'll be fun. Builds up some thick skin. Anyways, I promised all of our newsletter subscribers that I would get to the questions that they submitted on the link that got sent out first. And so we're going to start knocking these things out, because I've kind of given myself a couple hours. I made the cardinal sin of not actually eating anything yet today. I got busy and I was like, oh, I'll eat right before the live stream. And then the live stream snuck up on me. So anyways, I'm probably going to pass out in like 2 hours. So let's go. Let's dig in. Okay, let's do this. So what I've done is I've taken those questions, I've just kind of put them into a PDF here that we're just going to go through. So we're going to do this rapid fire, and then everybody in the chat who does have questions, once we're through this, I'm going to go to the chat for questions. So if you've already asked a question in the chat, when I kind of prompt you, put it in again, okay? And then the other nice thing that somebody did, who did this? Somebody did this a couple of live streams ago. They typed at the beginning of their question, they typed in bold letters, question. And it's easy for me to look and see what's a question and what's a comment. And it's really, really nice. So if you guys can do that, not a big deal if you don't, but it just kind of pulls my eye when I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat while we're doing this. So, all right, here we go. Chester, my main man, Chester. Man, just quick side note. I know, I'll get going. Don't worry. Chester, we've got something coming pretty, hopefully pretty soon. That's going to be awesome. I've actually been working with Chester on a record, and he's got some cool shit on the horizon. So, Melodyne versus autotune. Is one better than the other? Timing, tuning, clean versus raspy, rock, Melodyne, rap, autotune, strengths, weaknesses. Give it to us all, baby. Don't hold back. Just kind of a preface. I used to use autotune graph almost exclusively, kind of back when that was I don't want to say our only option, because there was another option, which I used a lot of the time. Autotune, while I was using it, and I stopped using it maybe like Autotune 8, maybe. I found Autotune did not track raspy vocals very well back then. I think it's gotten better, but back then it didn't tune them very well. It didn't even track them. It just wouldn't even give you the note option. So I would do as much as I could in autotune, and what I couldn't do in autotune, I would use pitch and time, and I would literally just highlight a syllable and I would just pitch it up 10 cents and listen and be like, no, it's got to go more. I'd undo that. I'd pitch it up 20 cents. I'd be like, oh, too much. I'd undo that, do 15 cents, be like, okay, cool, that's good, move on. I mean, it was crazy. Like there were a couple of records I did with singers who have really raspy vocals. And if you look at my discography from like 2003 to 2006, you could probably guess those records. I had to basically do it manually. Autotune didn't even touch it. And so the every syllable that I needed to tune was just trial and error with some sort of pitch plug-in audio suite, going up, going down, finding the right spot, moving on, and then having to go clean up all the crossfades because you had to take a little bit extra, on the side, so you had some room to crossfade. But it was a quite a mess. But sometimes it would take a day to do a song, and it was not enjoyable. When Melodyne came out, I started using Melodyne pretty quickly. And the thing with Melodyne that I liked is, although raspy vocals don't necessarily track perfectly, you at least do get a blob. They call them blobs. You do get a blob. And so even if the blob's not in the right spot, and I find this a lot, where let's say the singer's singing a D, let's just say like let's just say it's a D. Singer's singing a D, but it shows up on the screen as like a C sharp, and you're like, oh, I need to bring it up to the D, and you're actually no, it's not. That's not right. Now it's sharp. So I find in Melodyne sometimes with raspy vocals, the blobs need to be just, again, kind of like manually done. You can't look at the grid at all, or the piano roll. You can't look at that at all. You just have to do it by ear. But at least you can do it where you're not having to go syllable by syllable. If there's a line, if there's a word, you can kind of move it as a piece. It gives you a little bit of a guide. And also, you don't have to deal with all the kind of the crossfading, and you can also go back and correct some stuff later. So I have heard from like my editor, Irene. I believe she still uses AutoTune 9. The other problem with AutoTune is they've been fucking around with like different versions over the last 5 years, where it's like one version is good and the next version is shit, and then people want to go back to the other version, but their licenses doesn't work anymore. Like, they've just screwed everybody over so many times. I feel bad, I'm kind of talking shit on them because they do make good software. At least, they did. But it's kind of a masterclass in what not to do as a software developer of a tool that every single person in the industry uses. Like, go and start doing so many drastic changes. And nonetheless, I know a lot of people who use it. And I think in regards to the graphing, it's gotten better. Obviously with timing, Melodyne's had forever. Timing, being able to time stretch and align within AutoTune, I think is a newer thing. There was one workflow with AutoTune that I used to do a lot that I can't do with Melodyne, and that was when I was trying to tune. If I'm tuning, let's say I've tuned a lead and I've got a double and a triple. And I would tune the lead, and then what I could do is capture the tuned lead, and then take that curve and transfer that curve onto the double. So then you take that curve, you capture the audio from the double, but the curve, the correction curve is still there, and it just kind of pushes it into that. That you can't do on Melodyne, although you can overlay waveforms, so it's easy to kind of see, or overlay the blobs. I don't know. I think if I have to live with one for the rest of my life, it's Melodyne. But that being said, I haven't dug into the latest version of AutoTune in the graph mode enough to really be able to say. Maybe somebody in the chat who's on the latest and greatest. Maybe somebody in the chat can kind of chime in on that. So, hope that answers your question. And I will talk to you soon. All right. Mark J. At what point in the mix do you decide which drum samples to use? Actually, you know what? Before I jump to the next question, I'm going to have a quick look at the chat, just because if somebody's talking about this, I want this to be a little bit interactive. So, For me, it's autotune. To start, check are the vocals. Okay. Literally doing the pitch and time word by word on raspy vocals. Yeah, not fun. Not fun. Some of autotune won't get back to settings after the session. Yes, I have had that same problem, and I don't know what the solution is, but yeah, it's been, the autotune thing's just been a little bit of a nightmare. So I do see one question here that I'm gonna answer just because it kind of has to do with a little bit with vocals here. And it's from Tone Wolf West. For tracking vocals, what is the main priority for you? Performance, character, timing, pitch. When I'm working with singers for the first time, I tell them, everyone, I tell them the same thing. I can fix tuning, I can fix timing. I can't create emotion. I can't give your voice character. I can't turn a lackluster performance into a great one. So I do not care about pitch and I do not care about timing. I can fix both of those very easily. The rest of it, for me, emoting vocals, like a singer who can emote, that doesn't mean they've got a really cool character or voice. I mean, that's obviously great. But just being able to create some emotion. And I think I sent a newsletter last week where I talked a little bit about like paying attention to how singers get in and out of their lines. Is there at the end of the word? You know, you'd listen to like Def Leppard or there's a line, and that's like, I know it sounds funny. It sounds like little sex noises at the end of every line. But honestly, like that's where a lot of the emotion comes from. Or the funny example I used with the James Hetfield, he does that at the end of every line, and it's kind of like, yeah, there's aggression there. You feel it. So those are all things like actual tangible things you can listen to, and you can tell singers when you listen to a singer and they're just coming into the line really hard, da 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 da, and it's like that's not exciting. Have them like kind of swoop into it and swoop out of it, and have some at the end of the line, or kind of their voices creak going into it. There's all those cool sounds that when you just listen to it as a performance, like that's kind of where, in my opinion, where some of the emotion comes from. So anyways, okay, next question. Mark J, what point in the mix do you decide which drum samples to use? Will you build the mix based on recorded sounds, bringing in what you feel is missing, or do you have a handful of samples you'll always use from the beginning, in the session before the mix? When programming drums with software like Superior, how realistic would you want the printed tracks to be regarding bleed? Do you keep all the bleed across the tracks, or since you would gate anyways, do you lower them or turn them off? This is an awesome question because every time I'm using Superior to kind of like fake a real drum kit, I ask I always include the bleed in the toms, and I'm like, why do I do this? I'm like, if I could make this, if I could remove all bleed from all toms in a real kit, I would, but for some stupid reason, I keep it in. I just dial it back. So when I'm faking a kit with Superior, I keep all the bleed in, but I just dial it back. So if I'm even with like the overhead, sometimes I'll take the kick and the snare and the toms and I'll bring those back so the cymbals are more forward. And I'll just kind of balance it out to where it gets to a spot where it's still kind of there. But if I'm going to gate it, and I don't always hard gate everything, but if I'm going to gate it, it's not going to be problematic. But if I want to leave the bleed in there, then there is a little bit of bleed. And I don't know. I think my brain gets in the way of just wanting me trying to make it as realistic as possible. So I'm doing that. But again, I asked myself that same question. In regards to your question about the samples, the minute the drums have been tracked and edited, I will listen to, like, usually while I'm tracking drums, I'm talking about when I'm producing or tracking, and I'll get to when somebody sends me a mix as well. Usually when I'm tracking drums, there's already something I know I want to be a little bit bigger or better or brighter or whatever. And so the minute the drums are comped and edited, I'll start putting samples on to fill in those spots. So for instance, if the snare, if I'm like, I really like the tone of the snare, but we got a lot of hi-hat bleed and it's not as bright as I want, and I don't have as much top end on the snare, because when I would EQ in the top end, it would bring up all the hi-hat stuff. I'd just put a really bright kind of sizzly sample on there to give it that top end. Same with the kick drum. If the kick drum that we're using's got, really great, just kind of size and low end and everything. But the attack's not really the character I'm wanting. Maybe it's a little like lower in the frequency spectrum, or maybe it's just not as hard. I'll put in a kind of an attacky sample on, and vice versa. If the drum's kind of short and punchy and attacky, but I want some length, I'll put a longer sample on. So I usually pick samples pretty early. Now, once I get to mix, that's when I'll start being even more just kind of zoomed in and focused in on, okay, well, what else am I going to want? Now that the song's kind of been built out a little bit, now that we've got some guitars on, where do I need help? Do I need help? If a sample needs to be swapped out, if I need to add another sample. And then the other thing is, there have been a lot of sessions. I mixed a song last week where I got to the end of this song and I went out on a walk and I listened in my earbuds and I'm like, everything's great. I'm just not sure if the snare's bright enough. And so I came back. I tried EQing the brightness of the snare in, and it wrecked it. And so I just added another sample that was just very bright and didn't have a lot of anything else. And that was the trick. So the answer is I'll put them in whenever I need them. And like I've preached to you guys before, I'm very intentional about why I'm using a sample to begin with. And it's usually to fill some sort of deficiency in the live drums. For me, as I've said before, the sound of rock drums is almost, a lot of great engineers will probably disagree with me, but the sound in my head isn't just a live drummed kit. Like, it's almost unobtainable with just, miking up a drum kit. Even if you do all the tricks and have all the gear and all the best kits and whatever, there's always, to me, and maybe I'm just not that great of a tracking engineer, but there's always something that I'm like, I just wish that was a little more whatever. And then I put a sample on and I'm like, there, got it, done. So, great question. I'm going to look in the chat real quick. Do you track drums with something like D-drum triggers on the kit to have MIDI triggers and stuff? No, I don't use... I used to. We used to use the D-drum triggers. I actually used to use those to trigger gates. So we used to have drummer, like those 4-channel drummer, I think the 201s, and they had a trigger input, a key input. And so I used to put a D-drum on all the heads and then run that to the gate, and then I would gate them that way. But I found just cutting triggers after the fact to be the most accurate. And even if I'm just going to use, if I'm not going to go through the hassle and the time of cutting a trigger and getting it perfect, just putting one of the trigger plugins on and using that is as good as most of the triggers that I used to use. So, yeah. So there we go. Okay. Do I encourage the drummer not to bash the hell out of the cymbals? Yeah, I always ask them not to bash the hell out of the cymbals, unless I need them to bash the hell out of the cymbals. I think just getting a balanced sound. I mean, if I like room mics, so if the room mics are just all cymbals and I've moved the mics around and I can't find a spot, I mean, then it starts to become a little bit of like, hey, how can we balance this out? Maybe we swap cymbals. I find most of the time, unless you're dealing with a really great session drummer, that actually ends up sometimes ruining a take because they're thinking more about not playing the cymbals hard than they are about performing the parts and getting energy and whatever. So I'll deal with how I need to deal with it later. So I'm going to do one more question from the chat just because we're talking about drums here, and then I'm going back to the list here. Do I have the drummer give me single shots for samples after tracking the kit? Always, 100%. Do that all the time. So, any tricks to fix a snare that goes out of tune throughout the track? Yeah, that happens a lot. The thing that I find a lot is even when you pay really good attention to it, if you're doing multiple takes and you're comping between them, sometimes you'll go and grab a snare fill from a take that was 3 takes ago and the snare's a little bit lower or higher or whatever. There's a plugin from Waves I think it's called Torque, that kind of lets you change the kind of the resonance of a drum. I've actually gone in and used that and automated that on and off. But for the most part, if I get to a point in a drum track where the tuning's changing all over the place, like somebody before you asked, at the end of the session, I'll get the snare in the pitch that I want it. We'll get samples of that. And then I might replace all of the live hits with the sample, but leave all the bleed in between. So it's like every time there's a hit, it's the one that's in tune. And then everything else, all the bleeds kind of stays as is. So that way it's as least, it's not like you're just triggering, you're just using like a trigger plugin and it's just a sample track. It's actually just replacing the hits. I'll leave all the ghost notes because the ghost notes usually are slightly different tuning anyways because the drum's not being hit as hard. I'll leave all the ghost notes as they were, whatever they happen to be, but I'll just, all the actual big, 2s and the 4s I'll replace. So, okay, you guys are hijacking me here in the chat. Okay, I got to get back to the list here, and then we'll come back to the chat. Okay, so hold tight. All right, Goran Antovic. I bet that's a Vich, not a Vic. I hope. I used to one of my really good friends growing up was his parents were from Serbia, and anytime there was a Vic, he's like Vich. I'm like, okay, I got it. Okay. Maybe it'd be useful to talk about your approach for Crane Song Phoenix 2, because you mentioned several times that you use it as a replacement for tape. Also, would it be great to see how you use Stream Decks? Thank you very much. All the best. Thanks, Goran. Yeah, so Phoenix for me, I'm trying to think of the best way to put this. Phoenix for me is one of those plugins when you want to get, if you're listening to something and you're like, the source sounds good, I just want it to feel a little bit more like kind of in your face, or a little more like the transient is a little bit more balanced out with the sustain of the sound. I use Phoenix and I turn it up to 100% and then I just trim back the output. I very rarely am like in between on Phoenix. It's usually an on or off thing for me, and it's like full tilt. And then going and picking the different kind of the flavors. Actually, let me pull it up really quickly here. I think I got a session going here. Stand by, guys. All right, let me just pull it up here. Phoenix, Pahonix. All right. So I know this is probably kind of small for you guys, but so yeah, this plugin has 5 different flavors of kind of saturation, compression, whatever you want to call it, tape simulator, tube simulator, and then it's got opal, which is kind of dark, gold, which is neutral, and sapphire, which is bright. I live on the iridescent sapphire a lot. I like to use the dark essence gold a lot. And like I said, this is how I'm using it. I'm using it full tilt, and then I just trim down so that way when I turn it on and off, I'm not being shocked by the volume difference. And for me, Phoenix, the big thing for me that Phoenix does, that tape really does, is it actually shaves, like it shaves off the transient in such a pleasing way that it gives you the apparent, because the rest of the signal, it's not transient, and then the rest of the signal, the transient's getting shaved off, and it kind of blooms in such a way where the kind of the forwardness and the kind of the immediacy of the sound that you get with this basically did what I wanted tape, or this did what we were using tape for when I was still using tape. So quick story. When I went down to LA to work with Scott Humphrey, he had an MM1200, an Ampex MM1200 tape machine that we would record drums and rhythm guitars to. And basically what we would do is we had the output of the tape machine normaled to the input of Pro Tools. So we had the first 24 inputs on Pro Tools was basically going through the tape machine. So while we were recording tape, we were also going through the tape machine into Pro Tools. So we were going through the tape machine electronics, monitoring the input through Pro Tools. It's being recorded on tape, and we're also recording it on Pro Tools at the same time. Once we were done all the drum tracking for that day, I would go and dump those tapes into Pro Tools on another playlist. And so in Pro Tools, because we were syncing to time code, in Pro Tools, instead of having all of the takes in playlist at the same spot, there would be one here, and then the next one, they would be linear on the timeline. So if you could fit, let's say, depending on what speed we were tracking at, if you could fit, let's say, like 3 or 4 takes on a reel of tape, there would be take 1, take 2, take 3, take 4. And then I would switch to the next playlist, and then I would dump the tape. So every session we ever did, I had the digital and I had the tape coming back off the playback head after the fact. And the digital was going through the tape machine electronics. So the only difference was actually the tape. So it wasn't like one was bypassing the electronics and one was going straight to Pro Tools. And long story short, I liked the sound of it. I did like the sound of it. There was like an apparent loudness that you would get through it, and it was very forgiving. Like you could really EQ a lot, and you could really get crazy with compression. And if you got crazy with a compressor where there was a lot of transient, it would dial the transient back for you. It would contain it in a really great way. But there was a lot of drawbacks to using tape. The obvious one being it's kind of a pain in the ass to keep the tape machines aligned, keep the tape machines clean. There was always drift with the sync. It was a pain in the ass. And so when Cranesong Phoenix came out, I tried it out, and what I started doing was when I started actually doing a duplicate batch of tracks where I'd have both I'm trying to think of the best way to explain this. I would have a group of tracks, drum tracks that were coming through the tape machine, kind of the way I just explained. And then I would duplicate that all, and I would go with another set of 24 inputs to where I was bypassing the tape machine electronics. And then once all that was recorded, I would put that on a third playlist. So now I had digital going through the tape machine. I had the analog print, and then I had the no tape machine, nothing, just going straight to Pro Tools. And I started experimenting with Phoenix, and I found a setting that I liked, and I think it might have even been the iridescent, but long story short, I found a setting that I liked that once we were done tracking and everything was in the computer, I bounced out the fully digital with Cranesong Phoenix on it, and I would put that on a playlist. And for every project we did, I think we did this for about 4 or 5, before we would start comping, we would listen back and we would blind A/B which one, Scott liked, which one I liked, which one the artist liked, which one the drummer liked. And if my memory serves correct, I think the first 5 times we did this, everybody picked the all digital with Phoenix. And so at that point, we're just like, okay, we can get rid of the tape machine. We can stop doing this. And so we did. So, yeah, it's really great. I'm not going to get into the stream decks tonight because I could probably do a 3-hour live stream just on the stream decks, and the new integration of sound flow in Pro Tools. A lot of my macros have actually have kind of gotten broken, and I have to go in. I need to spend 2 days reprogramming stuff. So I'm not going to get into that tonight, but I will keep that kind of on the docket for future topics here. So I'm going to have a quick look at the chat here. Okay, Torque sucks. Well, Torque is kind of a one-trick pony, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. If it works, it works. So, question: in right tempo for the song, in using your service, would you do a simple help with me choosing the right tempo for the song in the future? Yeah, absolutely. Devil-Lock is free today. Nice. Devil-Lock's a great plugin. I use that all the time. Phoenix has a character on the vocals, high harmonies, to use on way too much digital source for me. I use Phoenix on lead vocals a lot. Like that's something for me where if I'm trying to get a vocal to be like right up front and compressors are doing weird stuff, like I'm just like, yeah, the compressor's not the right move. I'll go to Phoenix and just hit it with stun. Second best tape emulator if you're not using Pro Tools. Ooh. Satin from Yuhi. Love the mix on the new Dorothy record. Do you approach mixing programmed drums any different than live drums? Not really. I mean, you just have different stuff you got to work with. Sometimes mixing programmed drums is easier because of like I said, all the lack of the leakage and everything's very consistent. And then sometimes it's too stiff and you're looking for ways to kind of interject some humanness, randomness into it. But I mean, it's just about achieving the sound that's in my head and figuring out how I have to go about that. I've got different sources, but how to kind of get to the finish line is kind of the journey. So Phoenix is great, but Mixhead, in my opinion, Mixhead is great too. I find Mixhead to not be quite as drastic, maybe is the right word. Like I find I can get a little bit more out of Phoenix. But I do love Mixhead. When I want something that's maybe just a little more subtle, I go for the Mixhead for sure. Do EQ in on the way we're recording? Yeah, absolutely, always do. I mean, if it needs it. I mean, I'm not putting EQ on for no reason, but I don't shy away from EQing into while I'm recording. So, do I approach mixing distorted guitars in a rock mix using real guitar cabinets? Okay, I got a couple questions about that. We're gonna have to come back to that one because I did get a couple questions about that. So, this is a good one. Do you ever mix a rock metal record that had programmed drums and turned out sounding great that no one ever knew? Absolutely. Guess which ones? Okay. Yes, I have mixed. I've mixed a couple rights. This I haven't. I don't even want to say this out loud. There was a mix I did years ago that the drums weren't great. They didn't sound that great. The drummer didn't play them that great. And I knew them going back and tracking again wasn't going to be an option, and there was a deadline, and I was just hired to mix. I didn't record it, and I was trying to, I'm like, what's going to be the best way to get this over the finish line for the band? And I actually went in and reprogrammed the drums and used all the same parts. Like I really went through with a fine-tooth comb and then I triggered, I don't know if Superior Drummer was the thing, might have been BFD at the time. But I triggered drums, like a drum program, and it sounded awesome. I didn't exactly volunteer that information to the band, but I think they knew, and I think they were appreciative that I went in and just did whatever it took to get it done. But it was never really spoken about. At the time, I was pretty insecure about like how to deal with that situation, so I tiptoed around it. But I nowadays when I've had to do that, I have that conversation. And it's no big deal. And I'm just like, hey, listen, these drums aren't going to cut it. You guys mind if I'm going to use all the parts? I'll program them as the drummer played them. We just need better sounds, and everybody's cool with that. But yeah. Anyways, I'm like, why am I scared to say this? You guys have probably never heard it anyway. So, all right, next question here from Sean. When recording guitars into a DAW, do you print them in mono and add stereo through an effects channel, or print them as stereo with all the effects? If it is stereo, do you pan them left and right if you are double tracking? Okay, couple questions inside that question. I typically, when I'm tracking guitars, I'm typically tracking, like if I have an amp set up or even like with the Fractal, I'm typically tracking in mono. Now, I always take a clean DI as well as the amp, and I put that on a stereo track, but I mute the DI just, in case I need it down the road, but we're not listening to it. And then if I want stereo effects, I usually add those after in Pro Tools. Now, that's not to say we don't use effects in front of the amp or in the loop. We do, but we typically, when we're doing that, it's mono. And then we deal with kind of the stereo-ness, or we double it once it's there. Now, if we're talking about a very specific effect, so for instance, there was a song I did recently that had like a roto speaker effect. We tracked that stereo. So that was kind of like a special case where it's like, I want that roto thing to be stereo. And so we tracked it that way. Same thing with if there's a very like specific delay thing that we're going for that we don't want it to be after the fact, we want it to be in front of the amp, we'll track that stereo. But my typical setup is I'm tracking guitars mono, and then if I want something stereo, we'll either do it in the box or we'll double it, and that will be the stereo. And then the question about if I do it stereo, do I pan them left, right if I'm doubling? One of the things that I do, if I get a track that's like a stereo track that has stereo effects, and there's two of them, sometimes what I'll do is I'll pan in the one side of it. So let me just show you really quickly. So if I just pull up a track here, so you can see the pan knob here. Let's say these two tracks are my these two tracks are the doubles. What I'll do is I'll like pan the right side up the middle on one of them, and I'll pan the left side, and that will kind of give me it will keep all of the information there, but it kind of gives you just a little bit more of a stereo spread. You could also do this, but that sometimes kind of messes with the effect that you have on it, depending on what it is. So, yeah. Hope that answers your question, Sean. Justin, do you use mix bus compression? If so, what is your normal go-to compressor, and what settings do you normally use? Okay, great question. I absolutely use mix bus compression, and I actually set up a second camera today, so we can, hang on one second here, so we can see my mix bus chain here. So I've got, so these 1, 2, 3, well, there's 4. Those 4 units are all hooked up through each other. So I've got a hardware insert in Pro Tools, and that goes into the back EQ, and then that goes into the SPL Vitalizer, and then that goes into the Dramatic Audio Obsidian compressor, and then it goes into the Overstare. And then back into Pro Tools. And if there's something in here that I don't want, I use the bypass button on the actual unit. But I keep these all kind of chained together and then as a hardware insert. The compressor right here, you can't see it because of the light, but there's one of them's an in, one of them's a high pass filter for the side chain. What you're seeing right now is kind of a typical starting point for me. So ratio, let me get back on the mic here. Ratio's 4:1. Attack is 10 milliseconds. Release is an auto, and then makeup's usually all the way down, just so it's easier to recall for me, because I can make that up on the back end. And then the high pass filter in the side chain, that goes in and out all the time, depending on just kind of how everything's pumping. The other setting that you guys have probably seen 1,000 times on SSL compressors is 30 milliseconds and fast, all the way fast attack, fast release. I'll use that as well. And so kind of when I'm setting up a mix, I'll typically I'll typically start without it in, just get the general balance of everything, get an idea of what the track's doing. And then I'll insert my hardware and start just pushing in and out each unit to see kind of what it's doing to the track and if I like it or not. And when I start playing with the compressor, I'll just try a few settings that I know usually work. I'll listen to the attack times. I'll listen to the release times. I'll set it to where I think it needs to be. And then I start doing the rest of the mix into that. So it goes in pretty early, but it changes a little bit just kind of based off what's going on. But that's kind of my starting point setting on there. So, okay. Sorry, I'm looking at the chat here. Okay. All right. Tom C. I liked your comment about the number of plugins we might have bought over Black Friday that we may or may not ever use. How do you manage your wealth of plugins? How do you manage if and when to upgrade plugins or ditch any? How do you keep track of all that information? Along those lines, how do you manage it if or when to upgrade the OS on your computer? Like your thoughts and processes on backups. I got to go back and do the archive and backup live stream that got corrupted. I'm going to go back and do that again in the new year. So I'm going to kind of skip over that one because I do have a backup system. And it's actually changing a little bit. But I'm going to do a full live stream on that because I think it's very important. Just file management and that type of stuff. But in terms of the actual plugins, a few different things regarding the plugins. I wonder what's the best way to tackle this question. I would say the thing that I mean, one of the reasons why I have so many plugins is because I work with so many different producers and artists and engineers and I hate having to have somebody commit something and then potentially have to go back and undo it, or if the singer tracks again, punches in a couple lines and now we have to insert a vocal track and like that doesn't get print. Like I'd much rather it's kind of a cost of doing business for me that I've just kind of accepted that every year. I mean, plugins used to be really expensive. Like that's the thing that I have to remind people a lot. Like I think when I bought my like Waves Gold bundle in, early 2000s, I think the Gold bundle was like, I don't know, $4,000. I know the SSL bundle, I think, was like $2,000, and the CLA 76 CLA compressors, I think, was like $800. Like, you guys are getting these plugins now for like $25 when they're on sale. Like, I paid thousands of dollars for that stuff, as I'm sure some of you guys did. So, when I get to the end of the year and I'm tallying up my expenses and I've spent, maybe $1,000 on new plugins over the course of the year. I mean, yeah, I'd rather not, especially because some of these plugins I don't use beyond getting projects that have them on them. But it's substantially less than it used to be, and some years it's not even that much. I find the kind of the staying up to date is almost more expensive now because people are. That's how these companies sometimes have to stay in business, is by doing updates. They can't doing an update, adding some features and then having a paid update. Sometimes that's an easier way to keep the doors open and the lights on than it is to have to develop new products all the time. And I totally get that. But I think I find myself maybe once a month, I'll go and just kind of have a look at like the plugin installers and see. A lot of them will tell you if you need updates. If I see while I'm working in a session that a plugin needs to be updated, I'll just add that to a list. I won't update it right then and there. I usually wait until I'm between projects. The OS on the computer is kind of a different story. I only do that when I have to, or if there have been buggy OSs, and to get off of that once I can. But I'm still on. What am I on? So I'm on a Mac Studio M1, and I'm still on Ventura. If there are plugins, how we used to do it was interesting. How we used to do it was when plugins actually were relatively reliable because there was only, one system they could run on. You would never update unless there was a really good reason to. Even like Pro Tools, like you wouldn't be updating every month or every 3 months like a lot of us do now. But I find now, like the barometer for reliability has been brought down a lot. I find most plugins, most software these days, the business model isn't make sure it's bulletproof. It's put it out and then we'll let the users find all the bugs and then we'll fix them. And so I update a lot now. Whereas I used to not. I used to sometimes my system wouldn't get touched for a year unless there was a new plugin that came out or unless there was something that was really broken. Now I find myself updating all the time because I find everything has a bug. It's only a matter of what and when you discover it. So I don't know. Maybe that's a little ignorant of me, but that's kind of where I'm at. I find I'm updating a lot these days. So it's just a kind of, I can't tackle it all at once. It's just a matter of, if I've got a little bit of downtime, I'll go and update stuff that I know is on my list that needs to be updated, or if I see an email from the company. But the other thing that I also do that might be a little bit helpful for you guys, I'll take stuff out of my plugins folder. So if there's let's say there's a suite of plugins that I had to buy for a project, and that only that one producer uses them, and I never use them aside from that. When I'm done working on that project, I'll take them out of the plugins folder, and if that person then sends me a session, and when you open the session, it tells you that you don't have a couple of those plugins, I'll just go look in my unused plugins folder, and I'll say, oh yeah, I've already got those, and I'll throw them back in, and I'll reopen the session. So, yeah, I do that as well. So, all right, next question that was submitted. Steve Shaver, if you are using a not so top of the line vocal mic, is there any way to get that crisp high end you hear on albums, such as the ones you do, or are we just stuck till we get better gear? I can't just say, I won't say, no, you don't need a top of the line vocal mic. I will tell you right out of the gate, I can't remember which Nickelback record it was. One of the albums I did, my brain, my sense of time has kind of gone weird. It might have been Feed the Machine or No Fixed Address. I think that whole record was an SM7. I never heard any complaints about the vocal not being bright enough or not being clear enough or not being crispy enough or whatever. And I don't even think the mic pre might have been like the built-in one on the Avid Omni, because it was No Fixed Address. Now I'm talking myself through it. It was No Fixed Address because we were traveling, like we were setting up studios in rental houses, and we didn't have a ton of gear. It was pretty streamlined. Yeah, you can absolutely get great sounding vocals on, I'll say, less expensive gear. It just has to be good gear, and you need to know what to do with it after the fact. I think ultimately an SM7 is a great mic because it doesn't really distort that easily, and it's not overly sibilant, and it's not overly transient and crispy, and it's very forgiving. you can EQ the snot out of it after the fact and kind of get a lot of what you want out of it. So I tell everybody the same thing. If you're looking for a vocal mic and you don't want to spend a bunch of money, get the SM7. I still use the SM7 a lot on certain vocalists, or like I said, in scenarios where it's like, we just need to grab a mic and we're going to be setting up in a bedroom and like whatever. I'm not really that worried about it. There are cheap mics that don't sound good, but I would say the majority of the cheap mics that don't sound good on vocals, it's because they are trying to make it like super hyped, and it's causing bad resonances. I'd almost rather suggest you get something that's a little more neutral, and then use all the tools that we have now in plugins or running it into outboard gear after the fact, and getting that brightness and that air and that crispiness after the fact. So hopefully that helps. I'm going to have a quick peek at the chat. What are my top 3 Reverb room plugins in 2025? I really like the DB Verb from the Make Believe guys, which is the David Bendith plugin that has like the 4 faders, and those are all like kind of shorter. There is a long one, but a lot of those are like kind of like shorter sounds. That one's really great. I still use 480 emulations. They've got some short rooms in there that I really like. The other one that I use a lot, why am I talking about this? Let me just show you. Let me show you. Okay, so I'll just do this. Okay, so the DB Verb. Does it have a thing? There we go. Okay, so this has become a go-to for me when I want something shorter. You asked for my top 3. Okay, this isn't anything new, so it's not like it's a 2025 thing per se. But this is still one of my favorites. It's funny because this is the old one, the Eventide Princeton 2016, whatever it was called. I can't remember whether it was Princeton or Eventide or both, whatever. I still use this one a lot. So there was a newer one. When I say newer, it's actually more of like a model of the old one. Where is it? Where is it? There it is. SP 2016. This one. I do like this for rooms. And then, like I said, I use the 480s. The 480 from Relab. Relab's the one I use. Relab 480. So these are kind of my, let's say, my go-tos or my suggestions. They're all pretty good. I actually, as I was pulling this one up, I saw another Relab one that I do like a lot for shorter rooms. This one here. I really like the Relab reverbs. This one here. This is also very good. So, yeah, just play around and see what you like. Like, that's the thing. It's like I'm saying what I like, and you might try them and be like, "Oh, that sucks," because it's not the sound you're looking for. One might be too bright, one might be too diffused, one might not be diffused enough. Like, you just got to play around and see. All of these have demos. Spend a day just demoing stuff. That's kind of what I keep on telling people. How do I feel about mixing my own project compared to having somebody else to mix it? I actually love that question because I still sometimes have other people mix my productions. If I get to the end of a production and I'm not enthusiastic to mix it, I won't. And I don't have the time to like step away from it for a couple weeks and get enthusiastic about it, I'll have somebody else do it. Or if I feel like I'm like, oh, I know what this song needs to be, and that's not my style, that's not my tendency, and I've tried to take a stab at it, and it's just not working, I'll send those out. So I think it's great. Like, why not? why not have somebody else do it? Or if you're used to having somebody else do it, why not give it a try yourself? You might actually surprise yourself and be like, wow, it's harder to communicate what I want than it is to just do it myself. So I think that's that happens more often than you'd probably think. So lots of SM7 talk in the chat here. Yes, it's a great mic. It's nothing exciting, but it's like you can build that in after the fact. Speaking of the legendary David Bennett, did you ever listen to the 92 album he did with the Canadian band Svengali? Absolutely. Yeah. I think my dad had a bunch of, well, not a bunch. I think he had that Svengali record. Yeah, pretty awesome. Is there any piece of gear that you haven't found a good replacement for in the box? Not really. I'm so like satisfied with working entirely in the box. Like I do have outboard gear. I do have a summing amp. I do have like that, the stuff I showed you here. Like it's almost for less about the sonics and more about just like some workflow and just kind of like offsetting some of my like negative tendencies than it is like because that the plugins aren't good enough to replace them. If any of you told me right now I had to mix the next 5 years in the box only, I wouldn't panic. I wouldn't be pissed off. I wouldn't be like, oh God, what am I going to do? I'd be like, okay, sure, whatever. I'd have to change my workflow a little bit, and I would have to figure out ways to kind of work around some of those tendencies that hardware can just kind of remove from my brain. But not really. I mean, it's pretty awesome. Like, obviously I've got a pretty extensive plugin list, but when you look through your plugins and you see like all the stuff that we have, it's pretty amazing. When I started, like some of these studios I was working at, I mean, they had a lot of gear, but even still, the amount of gear they had was not even close to like what, the average Pro Tools user has in their plugins list. It's pretty crazy. No. How much do I quantize drums to the grid? I like shells to be on the grid. Fills, different story. I'll usually let fills kind of do what they need to do to feel right. Sometimes that's on the grid. Sometimes they needs to be a little bit off, ahead or behind. But I'll start there and then I'll evaluate to see is that making it sound too stiff? Is there something else happening in the song where the snare being slightly behind or ahead, or, depending on what the kick pattern is, it kind of depends. But if I had to say, I'll do shells on the grid. So, plugins these days are like 99% accurate, but why, or am I wrong, can't they replace super high compressed harmonies that had like vintage Yuri? Can replace this super high compressed harmonies that had like vintage Yuri 11D76, for example? I don't know. I want to say I disagree with you because it's all in the ear of the beholder, I guess. I've done some very extensive A/Bs, not recently because I've already convinced myself from doing some A/Bs like 10 years ago. The plugins are way better now than they were 10 years ago. 10 years ago, like I was satisfied with a lot of this stuff. I sold a lot of hardware. I think you have to treat them like different things. And I think a lot of the times when people see the interface that looks the same, they try to use it the same way, and they don't. Maybe it's the way that the gain staging is working. Maybe it's they're trying to use settings that they used on the hardware that now weren't modeled one-to-one or aren't giving the same thing. And the other thing that we got to keep in mind is a lot of the hardware has like it's gotten old. The circuitry kind of falls out of tolerance, and the certain things start kind of sounding different and getting worn and getting, certain things just, the circuitry doesn't sound like it used to. So, I've at the chop shop, we had 4 Blackface 1176s. They all sounded different. So I don't know. I don't buy in. I don't buy into the fact that plugins can't do a great job at what their intended purpose is. If you want to go after the last 1%, go for it. But I think you'd be very hard pressed to find a group of engineers or producers that if you were to sit down and do an A/B test where you took the most sought after hardware compressor and you took maybe just a run-of-the-mill software compressor and you shot them out against each other and you got them matched as close as you could, that with one extra plugin after the compressor, whether it be a saturator or an EQ or something else, you couldn't get the people to like that one better than the hardware. Like we're talking about something in a vacuum, and what we're making music. A mix is not a vacuum. Like an 1176 on a lead vocal, as important as that sound is in a mix, with the rest of the mix going on, the difference that you're going to hear between the two is not the difference between a good mix and a bad mix. It never will be. And maybe I drank the Kool-Aid and I'm not being open-minded about this. I think I'm being I'm usually pretty objective, and I'm usually willing to say I was wrong or I'm willing to change my mind. But I haven't been in a situation where there's been a piece of hardware that's like, this does not, like, we can't replace this, or we can't use something different. The mix falls apart. It's never happened in my career. So, yeah. But you know what? I know some people who can hear, like, they'll A/B converters and they'll be like, oh my God, the difference is huge. And I'm like, I don't know. It kind of sounds the same to me. So I think certain people maybe are just more sensitive to certain frequencies and certain sounds and certain signatures that, I don't know, maybe I'm just not hearing, like, everybody hears differently. So maybe I'm not hearing the same thing that other people are hearing when they're, A/Bing compressors and EQs, hardware stuff. So I don't know. Okay. I'm going to go back to all right. That was Steve, Sean, Justin, Tom, Steve. All right. Vasily. Wondering what's your approach on quad tracking guitars? Do you have a pair that is your main sound and a secondary that, let's say, is dirtier or more mid-focus to complement the main scoop sound of a modern amp? What is your general approach? Thoughts on this? Awesome question. I think I've talked about this a little bit. Again, being intentional. A left and a right is just almost status quo these days, right? So when I'm working with a guitar player, before the guitar player's even finished the first take, I'm already ready to say, okay, let's double that, and he knows it's coming. That's just like standard operating procedure now. But the triple and the quad, and some people ask me about the triple up the middle or quadding. I will do it if there's a reason to do it. And so one of the things that you touched upon here is there's 2 scenarios here. That's exactly why I would quad an already, let's say, doubled rhythm guitar part. Number one, I just want it to be, I want to have a dirtier layer, like something that's just maybe fuzzier and less defined that can just give it a little bit of chaos. But I want to be able to mix that in. I don't want it to be at the expense of kind of like the main sound, or vice versa. There's a lot of times where, we're tracking a rhythm guitar part, and it might be at the very beginning of the production. Like there might only just be drums and maybe a guide vocal, and now we're tracking rhythm guitars. And so it's really easy to dial in a sound that might be too scooped because there's nothing else that it's competing with. And so sometimes as the production builds, you realize you need another layer to be more articulate. And sometimes that's reamping. That can do it too. But doing a triple and a quad gives you the ability to then have that be dynamic throughout the mix. So for instance, maybe in the verse, the triple and the quad aren't on, and then in the chorus, that's your lift. Or maybe it's on the whole time, but you dial it back, or maybe you EQ it slightly different from part to part. So I really like having a triple and a quad, if at all possible. I mean, obviously, depending if you're doing a whole record, that's a lot of just to do it in case. Like that's a lot of extra playing, and I'm such I'm so sensitive to tuning. Sometimes getting just the main and the double is so time intensive, getting the tuning right, that the thought of doing a triple and a quad is like, no fucking way. But you know, if you've got the luxury to do it, when I get a mix from somebody and I've got quads, I love it. I don't always use it, and it's not always loud, but it gives me the option. I do love it. What I don't love, and this would be the caveat, I don't love when people give me a quad and all four guitars sound the exact same. It is a sound, but very rarely do I find that all four together sound better than just two together with the volume matched. Typically, if you're going to do a triple and a quad, I like to have the sound be slightly different for a reason. What is the quad doing that's going to help the mix? Is it you want size, you want chaos, you want articulation, you want kind of mid-range frequency? Are you trying to fill something sonically? And that should instruct kind of like, okay, what are we going to use this for? So that's my MO when it comes to quads. Okay. This is a good question from Chris. I didn't ask myself this question, although this is a question I ask myself all the time. Replay that part. I think I just talked myself into circle. I'm going to hit the chat really quickly before we get to this question, because this is probably going to be a little bit of a rabbit hole. Okay. What's one album you wish you could have mixed? Oh, man. I'm a really, this might be a little surprising, or maybe not. I'm a really big Jimmy Eat World fan. I would love to mix one of their records. And they had a record, I think it was called Futures. It was after the Bleed American one. And it had, just like the production was a little bit, had a little more guitars and the drums were a little bit bigger and whatever. Not that didn't sound great. I loved that record. I would just love to get the multi-tracks. I'd love to go and mix that record. I had a couple songs and a couple productions on it that I really, really loved. What else? Man, that's an interesting question. That's the only one that really comes to mind. Somebody, Dan, you just mentioned the 94 Crew album, the self-titled. I would have wrecked that record. I would have wrecked it. I definitely would have wrecked it. So I'm not going to say that one. That's the thing. I don't want to say my favorite records because, like, they're my favorite records for a reason, and I honestly think I'd probably wreck it rather than make it better. I think my brain is going to like productions that I really liked, but maybe just wish the mixes were just a little bit like bigger and a little bit more hi-fi, a little more bombastic. Yeah, that's a tough question. Sorry, I don't have a good answer. I'll think about that one. it's going to make me ponder. I'm going to be staying up at night thinking about that. Did you ever work with some of your mixing heroes? If so, how was that experience? Yeah, actually, I've been really fortunate. I've had, oh man. So Randy Staub, who's probably like, for me, probably the most influential engineer mixer kind of in terms of the records that made me want to get into production. I've worked with Randy. He's mixed some of the Nickelback stuff that I've produced, and it's awesome because he's just got such a distinct like sonic sound signature that I remember like thinking like, I got this great rough mix and Randy's going to mix the song and whatever. And then thinking that my rough mix is pretty good. And then within like a couple hours hearing Randy's first pass and being like, oh God, it's so good. It's so good. Just kind of like effortlessly doing the thing that I'm like, how does he do that? Chris Lord-Alge's mixed a bunch of projects that I've either engineered or produced. I love working with Chris. Like, again, another just legend, mixed some of the biggest rock records of all time. And just is such watching him mix and working with him. It's like kind of an interesting, the thing that I got the most from working, or, seeing him work and having worked with him on some of those things is like his big picture is like like a superpower. Like, as much as we're diving into, plugins and gear and hardware versus software and snare sounds and vocal compression, like, obviously we all care about that stuff, but he's such a big picture mixer, in my opinion. I don't know if he would say the same thing. I think he would, but like, he's listening to the mix. He's not listening to the elements of the mix. He's listening to the mix. And that was such a lesson for me because, I still find myself like I have to be very disciplined with not like, listening to each individual element of a mix, and losing kind of the overall big picture. But yeah, I loved working with both those guys. Early on when I was in LA, Mike Shipley mixed an album that I worked on. I didn't sit there with him while he was doing it, but had a few interactions with him, and that was amazing as well. Again, like, yeah, these guys mixed the records that made me want to make records. So yeah, nothing but amazing experiences. And, I love all of these, like, mixed with the masters and these master classes and the YouTube videos. Like, you guys like don't realize how lucky you are to be able to like get a glimpse of like watching those guys mix, even if it's on video. Like that like, if you wanted to see Chris Lord-Alge mix a track in 2002, you had to pay him a shit ton of money to do it. And he still had to like the song enough to say yes. Like it's pretty crazy how we can all have a little bit of that experience. I mean, maybe he's not mixing a song that you guys produced, or maybe it's, you're not sitting in the room with them and going through recalls and stuff like that. But yeah, it's pretty amazing. Like, just the access that we have now is pretty awesome. But yeah, great question. Great question. How are you automating the levels for your reverb sends? Are you turning the reverb on for every track that you want effect and then automating the overall effects, or using automating each thing, or each fader? I'll show you really quickly. So how I automate is, if you guys have seen any of the stuff that I've done, let me look here. Maybe I've got some automation. No. Okay, so let's just say here I've got a send going to a delay on this guitar track. What I will typically do is I will go to that send, so send 7, and I will automate it here. So you can either draw in automation, right? Do your draw in your automation that way. You can just do more kind of broad stroke automation. So let's say there's a note here that I want to put a delay throw on. This is what I'll do. Like I'll do something like that. And so as it's playing, through. Oh, hang on a second here, guys. Let me turn this off. So as it's playing through here, you see the fader jump up and then jump down. So you can do that, or you can automate it with, obviously with a control surface. But it just kind of depends on what you do. But I'm automating my effects from the send, and I'll just do it, on the automation lane or on the fader here. So I'm not sure if that was your question or not, but hopefully that answers it. Somebody said here, love the take on the hardware versus plugin comparison. Most times it's an EQ away from the same sound. Yeah, I did this once. We were doing an AB. This is years ago. This is probably like 15 years ago. We were doing an AB. Ironically enough, we were ABing 1176s. We were ABing a vocal chain. And it was Neve 1073s and 1176s. So we had a couple different Neve clones. We have a couple different 1176s. And I remember we would set up the chain. We would record a few things through it. Like we had it on a hardware insert and then we would print it. And I remember the one that everybody liked the best just had a little slight kind of mid-range push to it. And I was just out of curiosity. Like I wasn't trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes, but I was just curious more for myself. I put an EQ7, an Avid EQ7 on the one that was second choice. And I added like a dB of 2K, super broad. And then we did the test again and everybody picked that one. So that was just like, it's one of those lessons to me being like, if you're working in a vacuum, absolutely pick the one that's the best. But a lot of the time, like you can get so close by just layering a few different things or just treating it slightly different, Like that's the other thing when we were talking about like guitar amps and stuff like that. People are like, oh, I don't like that guitar amp. There's not, why? Or they'll pick one because it's got a certain character to it, and then they'll A/B it to a completely different kind of character amp, and I'm like, yeah, but what if you tweaked the one to sound like the other? Like, wouldn't that get you a little closer? Maybe it's sticking a pedal in front of the one to get it closer to the second, and now you've got a better comparison. So anyways, we can drive yourself nuts with all this stuff. Randy's low end is insane. It's not even close. Yeah, it is. It's crazy. It's crazy how like just across the board for his entire career. He just, he had some tricks and whatever they were, they consistently worked, or it was just the way he heard things and the way that he was able to kind of compartmentalize and glue things together. And yeah, it's crazy. Okay. Keep the show rolling. All right. I'm losing track of all my screens here. Hang on. All right. Chris, in terms of having a career and making a living out of music production / mixing, what do you think are the most important factors? Was there a time in your career when you felt a shift and started to think things are really happening now? If so, what caused it? Or was it a lot of gradual linear type curve? My gut reaction is it was more of a gradual thing. I was talking with a good friend of mine today, and we've both had, I would say, successful careers up to this point, and we were both almost kind of like talking to each other as if we hadn't made it. Because I think I don't know if you ever really feel like you've made it. I mean, maybe if you're, if you've got, 1,000 platinum records and Ferraris and Grammys, maybe at some point you're like, I've made it. I've made it. I would say there was there was 2 points in my career that were, I would say, kind of like lines in the sand. And so one was really coming to the conclusion, because I started in the music business when Napster was decimating the music business. And so I kind of got the tail end of when things were good, and then I got all of the bad, and then I saw it kind of climb out of that. And so I threw out kind of the downturn, early 2000s of the industry, late 2000s. I kind of redefined success as if you can pay your bills and support your family, like you've made it. When I first got into the business, I wanted to work on the biggest records, and I wanted, everybody to know the records that I worked on. And I wanted to win awards, and I wanted platinum records all over the walls. Like I definitely was like motivated by all that. And just seeing kind of how the downturn of the industry just demolished so many people's ambitions, because that for a while it was pretty bleak, and the thought of working on a record that sold 10 million copies or 5 million copies or 2 million copies, that seemed impossible for a good. And I mean, I don't even know what the equivalent is on streaming now. It's like a completely different metric. But a record going platinum in 2005 or 2004, I can't remember what it was when it was like the total shitstorm. Like I think there was one year where they said the RAA said there was like a handful of records that went platinum. And up until that point, like it was tens or 100 every year that would go platinum, and then it was like turned to nothing. So I kind of redefined my success as like, okay, if you're paying your bills and you're supporting your family, like you've made it. You've got to things are happening to where you're good. And then the other thing that I think was a real big turning point for me was when I drew the line in the sand also of who I was going to work with. And so I decided, there was a very distinct point when I decided I'm not going to work with people that I don't want to work with. And as trite as that sounds, it's amazing how many people work with people they don't want to work with. And I think it can set you up to feel successful when you go in to a session and you're working with people that you've made a choice to work with. And I'm not just saying like big artists. It can be somebody who's, paying for it out of their own pocket, never had a hit, might never come out, like whatever it is. If you enjoy working with that person and you respect that person and they respect you, you can come out of that session and that might feel successful to you. And so I think it kind of just, it's a little bit of a perspective of, well, what is having a career and making a living look like? And everybody, I think, has to define that for themselves. But I've been able to pay my bills and support my family making music with people that I want to work with. And so that to me is success. Not all the records I make, most of the records I make aren't, let's say financially successful. They don't, a lot of them don't ever recoup. Some of them nobody ever hears. Some of them come out and nobody listens to them and they don't get streamed, or some of them don't come out at all. Like there's all these different scenarios. But when I stopped looking at the outcome as kind of like the determination of success is when I felt maybe more like, okay, yeah, I've made it. It wasn't because I got a bunch of platinum records, and it wasn't because I got a bunch of Grammys, because I didn't. It was because I would, at the end of the year, like I'm doing kind of right now, I'm thinking back on like what projects did I do last year, and all the fun that I had, and all the challenges that I overcame, and all the stuff. And I'm like, yeah. And you know what? And I paid my bills, and I supported my family throughout it, and success. So that looks different for everybody. some of the important factors. I think one of them that I just obviously said was like really thinking hard about what success looks like, so that way you know what you're dealing with. Because I think if I would have continued to just aim or define my career based off of awards, based off of sales, that type of stuff, I probably would have done things differently. There's probably projects I wouldn't have done because I knew maybe that the likelihood of them being successful was a little less, but I really like the person. So in my current situation, I'm like, that's going to be an awesome project to do. This probably won't see the light of day, but that's going to be fun. And I really like that person and I really like what they do. And I'm willing to do it. I would probably have just been a lot more analytical and a lot more kind of ruthless about only working on something that I thought was going to be quote unquote successful. And there's nothing wrong with that. I know people who do that. Nothing wrong with that at all. It just wasn't the way that I kind of zigged and zagged through my career up to this point. The experience was almost more important, and the relationships were more important than the the sales and the outcome, I guess. So hopefully that answered your question. I feel like there could be a back and forth on this. I feel like that's a podcast episode in itself. So, let's hit the next question. Let me pull it up here. Nick, do you use any type of house curve to your monitors, or do you prefer flat as you can get them? Also, what level do you typically track and mix at? Do they differ? Great question. So I actually had a buddy of mine, Josh from Neumann, came over the other day, and we were just doing some tuning stuff on my speakers, and we got to the end of kind of calibrating everything, and we were using the Neumann automatic calibration, and then we were checking it on with the smart analyzer and the whole thing. We were just kind of playing around and moving some stuff around and getting it dialed in. And we got it to a point where it was kind of on paper, kind of right. Let's say on the meter, it was right. And I started like EQing it myself, like just giving myself, let's say, a house curve. And so what I've realized over the years is if I'm listening to something, and nothing's ever flat, and it changes depending on the speakers and it changes depending on the room. But I definitely like to hear more bottom end and a little bit less brightness on the very top end. So once everything was dialed in, what I ended up at was like almost like a slight tilt, where the low end, I think we ended up going a very kind of gentle slope from 150 hertz down. I think we went up like 4 dB, and then I think we did like a 1 or 2 dB roll off starting at 8K, going down very gently. And so I have found that in the room I'm in now with the speakers I'm using now, that gets me to do what needs to be done. So that way, when I take it out of here or I put headphones on or anything else, it's translating more the way that I want. In terms of level, I mix very quietly and I track, not obscenely loud, but I track a little bit louder. I think when you're tracking, just there's usually an energy. You're working with somebody, you're feeling the part. Everything's kind of new and fresh, and having just loud helps that whole thing. So, okay. Okay, this is a big question, but it's one that I really want to answer because I had a really long conversation actually with Josh when he was over here after we were doing the speakers. We went out for dinner. We had a really interesting conversation that I think this applies to. So before I get into this question from Dennis, I'm going to check out the chat. Make sure if anybody's got a question I haven't answered in the chat, feel free to jump in now. I'm going to spend maybe 5-10 minutes before diving into this this question that Dennis sent in about AI and like the whole AI thing in the within the realm of what we do. So, okay. So I'm going to have a look at the chat. So like I said, if you guys put questions in that haven't got answered now, throw them in now because I'm staring at the chat. I'm going to be able to see it. So, okay. How important is layering saturation for you to achieve loudness in a mix, or does it never cross your mind? I think I just did a post about this last week, this week. When I was transitioning from working, let's say, I'll say analog, I was still recording in Pro Tools and we were mixing out of Pro Tools, but we were mixing on a console. We were still recording a tape, all that stuff. Lots of outboard gear. When I transitioned in the box, that was not fun. And I remember talking with people about it and be like, I can't do it. So I know some people can, but I can't mix in the box. And I had I'd kind of like built up this like limiting belief a little bit about that I can't do it. And the thing that I would say, there was two things, well, three. There were three things that I had to do. Two of them were almost like tricking my brain into not thinking I was mixing in the box. So we don't have to talk about those. But the third thing was doing exactly what you're talking about. Layering, saturation, compression, doing small incremental changes as opposed to trying to hit it hard with one thing. So can I give you an example? Let's talk about a lead vocal. A lead vocal coming out of Pro Tools. Well, let's take this a step even further. A lead vocal recorded on, let's say, a U47 tube mic going into a 1073 mic pre, and then going to, let's say, an LA2, which was a very common vocal chain when I first kind of got into the business. Then going into Pro Tools, we'll skip the tape machine. We'll go past tape machine, but then into Pro Tools. Then when you're mixing, going out of Pro Tools, going to an analog console, so going into the line input or the tape monitor input, however you have it set up, it being potentially compressed on the board by putting the compressor in on the board if you're on an SSL, an EQ, having an insert that maybe then goes to an 1176 and then maybe goes to like a DBX 902 and then back to the console, and then the console that channel then going to the mix bus, and then all of that being mixed and sent out to potentially, let's say, some more like mix bus compressors and EQs, all that stuff, right? Okay. So think about how much analog circuitry that vocal has hit by the time it's done. Now, forget about what the 1176 is doing. Forget about what the LA2 is doing. Even if none of that was doing anything, just the circuitry it was going through, you're going to get these little small incremental saturation, coloration, in some cases even like distortion, compression. All of that stuff is happening on every one of those paths. And most of the stuff that we were working on, like, it wasn't super clean. Everything wasn't super hi-fi clean everything. And so when I started working in the box, and I know it seems almost like kind of stupid to think of that we didn't realize this, but we kind of didn't realize this. Now everybody realizes it because everybody's spoken about it so much. But back then, when I would go to mix in the box, I would have this vocal, and I would put an 1176 on it because that's what I did in the analog world, and I would EQ it with whatever EQ I had, and it would go to the mix bus and whatever, and I would do this across all the tracks, and I'd be like, "Fuck, why does this sound terrible?" And then I would go and try to change the EQs and change the change the plugins or the compressor. I would compress more, I'd compress less, I'd change, like, it just didn't, it never really worked for me. And at some point, I realized that I needed to start building in these layers of, we now call it saturation. Back then, we didn't really call it saturation. But I needed to layer in at all these different stages within the mix session, ways to kind of almost, and I wasn't necessarily trying to simulate analog, but I was trying to achieve the same result of, for me, it was all about the transient. It was all about the transient. And so what I didn't realize was, in the analog realm, forget about a tape machine, in the analog realm, running through that signal chain, all that stuff I told you, by the time you would get to the end, that transient would be softened. And when it gets softened, it's not that it doesn't have any punch anymore, but what happens is it gets kind of quieter, which then makes the bulk of the sound relative to the transient, everything's a little more balanced. It's not this big spiky transient and then everything else. And also, you're getting a lot of harmonic information, right? So the harmonics are being kind of spread throughout the rest of the frequency range. So you're getting these harmonics that are exciting the top end that I was trying to dial in with an EQ. I was like, why can't I get the vocal bright enough? And I turn up the EQ. I'm like, now it's harsh. Why the fuck is it harsh? Blah, blah, blah. Like, I just didn't know what was going on. And once I started building in all these layers of saturation, so I'd be a lot more cognizant of when I was tracking. I'd be like, okay, I need to maybe be a little bit more heavy-handed with some of the compression to dial in that stuff before I even hit Pro Tools. And then once I'm in Pro Tools, I'm like, what can I do before I even hit an EQ or a compressor that will kind of give it a little bit of soften that transient a little bit. And sometimes it was a compressor. Sometimes it was using two compressors. It was using one to dial back the transient a little bit, and then it was using another one to do kind of what I wanted the compressor to do. And then it was, instead of that going to the mix bus, what if I did a subgroup that I then had some other sort of kind of like analog saturation thing. And for a lot of the times early, like the analog saturation thing was a compressor that might not have been doing a lot. And so it would go to a subgroup and we'd compress a little bit more. And then from the subgroup, it would go to the mix bus and we'd compress a little bit more. Or people started making saturation plugins or tape simulation plugins or tube emulation plugins. And we started using that. But for me, even today, that's one of the reasons why I use the hardware, is because I don't like seeing 6 plugins all doing a little bit. But when I run through all this hardware, I'm getting almost the same benefit. I could rebuild all these chains in the box and get those layers of saturation to where the outcome was probably going to be about the same. But I don't like knowing that all that stuff's there and all that stuff's happening. So that's why I like to get it out of the box. I'm not looking at it. But I know all that stuff's happening without it being in the session. So yes, absolutely. Long answer to a very, very great question. For me, that was the linchpin to mixing in the box. It was the layers, and I won't just say saturation, it's processing. The layers of processing at different points. It wasn't stringing 5 plugins together. It wasn't just that. It was recording slightly differently, or like I said, when we would start, when I would record directly into Pro Tools, I'd put Phoenix on everything, and then I would just print that, and so it was baked in, and that was like step number 1 of kind of like sweetening or softening or analoging my in the box mix. And so yeah, great question. I could talk about that all day. As you can tell, like it's a thing for me, because it was hard. It was hard figuring that out. I mean, we're talking like 2007, 2008, maybe. Like, people were still saying you couldn't mix in the box. Like, you weren't. Some mixers wouldn't get jobs if they mixed in the box. Like, people were only hiring people who mixed on the console still in 2010. So, yeah. Great question. Question: who owns more black T-shirts, me or Chris Lord Algae? Definitely Chris Lord Algae, but I'm probably not far behind. It's the uniform. You know what? I'm not a minimalist by any means, but I definitely got to a point where I'm just like, I'd go shopping and I'd buy like a bunch of shirts, and then I'd like never wear them because I just grabbed the black shirt out of the closet. So now it's like I just buy black shirts. This one's gray. Come on. This one's kind of gray. Charcoal. Love that. What speakers am I using? Are there multiple pairs? I am using Neumann KH310s. Which are they're kind of smaller 3-ways. And I have also some little Yamaha, I don't even know what these are, MSP4s, I think. They're just a 4-inch woofer with a tweeter. And that's kind of my, and they've got an EQ on the front of them. And I've got the high EQ and the low EQ on the front turned all the way down. So it's a very like mid-rangey sounding speaker. If you turn the EQs up, they actually sound pretty like full range, but I turn them down and it kind of like simulates a little bit of like a kind of like an Oratone, or I used to use these old computer speakers that then started buzzing, and I was just like, fuck this. So yeah. Oh, Chris Holmes in the house. What's going on, buddy? Taking the roti to scent class. Everyone having a great holiday. Thanks, sir. All you know. Oh, thank you. Thank you. How much do you talk to the mixer before, during recordings when you know he's going to mix it? Not at all. I sometimes don't even pick the mixer until I'm done recording it. I mean, it's tough. I mean, you might have an idea, you know. I mean, like I said, there's a handful of guys that I really like what they do. So if I'm going to hand this off to another mixer, I have an idea of who it's going to go to. But me personally, as a producer, I'm not, you know, if I'm going into a recording session, I'm not calling the mixer being like, hey, what do you want? That's my job. My job as the producer is to make those decisions. Once I've made all those decisions, then there could be a conversation with him about, what do you want me to do with the vocal effects? Do you want me to bake those in? You want me to print them on a separate track? Do you want them on a playlist? Like that type of stuff. You know, or maybe if you're a less experienced engineer, maybe having a conversation with the mixer about how you should be recording certain sources and that type of stuff. Sure. You know, but if I'm producing a project, I'm not talking to the mixer until the production is pretty much done. That's not his job. His job is not to help me produce the track. So, okay. I think I hit all the chat questions. I'm going to go back to this. Okay. Dennis. This is a really... let me just read this really quickly here. This is long, so bear with me. The AI floodgate is open. Every second or third submission I now receive is AI generated. Some are alarmingly good, perhaps indistinguishable to the average listener. What's more shocking is the scale. Several of these AI profiles already boast hundreds of thousands of monthly listeners. Core problem, crisis of authenticity. This creates dual crisis. Small, authentic artists are being drowned out by an endless automated content stream. All artists face diluted attention as algorithmic music competes directly for ears and playlist slots. Forces a fundamental question. What is the irreplaceable value of the human musician? The human edge and a potential path. AI can't perform live. More crucially, it can't feel or convey genuine emotion. Makes me wonder if the answer lies in a defiant return to tangible human crafted sound. Rumors that bands like Korn are returning to tape suggests this instinct is already taking hold. My concrete questions for you. For the small independent artist in a landscape flooded with AI content, what is the most effective, non-obvious way to be heard? It's not recording on tape. Uh, is it about marketing, sound, community, or something else entirely? For the established artist, beyond touring, how can you leverage your human status as a strength? Is emphasizing real recording processes like tape, I already answered that, live takes, a credible strategy? No. Or is just a niche aesthetic? As a producer, do you see a growing value in sonic fingerprints that are hard to fake, like imperfections of analog gear, transformers, tube saturation, etc., as a counter to AI's perfected, boring sound? Okay. I need to collect my thoughts on how this is not going to be an hour-long answer. So, okay. Instead of answering this question directly, let's just have a little bit of a overall conversation about this a little bit, because I have a lot of not insights. I've got a lot of opinions and speculation and hope and just some general observations about this. So I'm just going to go through your note here and kind of touch upon a few things. And you said it. Some are alarmingly good. Yes. Some are alarmingly good. I've heard some stuff come out of Suno that sounds as a mix. So a mix comes out of Suno. That somebody's just given prompts to, and it's spit out something that is very good, really good, exceptional even, I'll say. I've heard it spit out a bunch of very shitty stuff as well. And so where this comes into, I think the part that's a little scary is it's simply now just a numbers game. And when the computer can spit out, or AI can spit out, I mean, I don't even know if you're running Suno all day long, how many songs can you spit out and post and then just let people sift through them? I mean, the number's probably very high. I mean, you could probably release a couple hundred songs a day if you weren't actually like going through and filtering them and listening to them and making any sort of decisions based off of whether they're good or not. So yeah, I will agree with you. Some of the stuff that's coming out of this sounds very, very good. Small, authentic artists are being drowned out by an endless automated content stream. Also very true. Very true. Small, authentic artists have often been drowned out by the big commercial artists. So I'm not saying it's okay, but I don't think that's kind of the linchpin to this issue. All artists face diluted attention as algorithmic music competes directly for ears and playlist slots. That is also very true. What is the irreplaceable value of a human musician? I think I mentioned a few minutes ago, I started in the business when Napster decimated the music business. I worked at a major label in Toronto, and there was so much talk about whether or not there would even be a music business anymore. Like, it was that bad. This conversation was happening in 2001 at every major label and big management company and artists, and everybody was having this exact conversation back then. It was slightly different because it was about the business model, not necessarily about the content creation. I remember having conversations, debates, arguments with friends, family, people I just met for the first time that, oh, what do you do? Oh, I work in a recording studio. Oh, really? And then you start getting in the conversation. And I remember so many of those conversations being based around the ethics of pirated music. And I would say it was overwhelmingly accepted that not paying for music was totally okay. And I would get so mad whenever somebody would just be kind of like, yeah, well, whatever. I don't have to pay for it, so I'm not going to. Or, yeah, but those artists make enough money. But there was always some like little like kind of flippant, not really valid argument as to why it was ethically okay to steal music. And I used so many different analogies, and I would usually find one based off of who I was talking to. So if I was talking to somebody who worked at a restaurant, I would say, well, how would you feel if somebody came into your restaurant and, you know, you waited on them for an hour and the cooks made their food, and you know, the busboys cleaned up after them, and all the stuff that goes on in having a restaurant, and everybody just got up and walked out without paying the bill. I'm like, would you be pissed off? Well, that's different. That's different. And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. I'm getting to a point here. Bear with me. Nobody cared about Napster or LimeWire decimating the music business in 2000. When I say nobody cared, the only people who cared were the people who were getting decimated by Napster and LimeWire and piracy, right? Most people didn't care. And that was my experience, at least, because I would have these conversations with everyday people outside of the business, and with very few exceptions. There were a few people who are like, I don't do that. That's bullshit. I want to support the art. Yep, sure. Great. That was great. So I want to give some credit to the people who did have some, a little bit of moral high ground. But as a whole, society didn't care that much. I think the bigger question, or the bigger thing that I see with AI, is this isn't about the music business. This isn't about artists. This isn't about record companies. This isn't about Spotify. This isn't about me. This isn't about other producers and mixers. This is about like mankind and humans in general and society as a whole. If Napster and LimeWire was going to take out the music business, the automotive business, the healthcare business, the financial business, and the education business, all at the same time in the year 2000, that shit would have been shut down in 2 seconds. Everybody would have had a problem with it because it somehow would have affected them or their families or somebody that they love. And so if you were a lawyer in 2000, stealing all your music from LimeWire, you didn't care that much. No big deal. But if there was an ChatGPT that was all of a sudden cutting into half of your business because now people were getting their legal advice from ChatGPT, all of a sudden you're like, whoa, 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 this AI thing. Oh, this, no, whoa, whoa, whoa. And so I'm not pointing out lawyers. I'm saying this is everybody. We are all going to get affected by this. There's very few people who are immune from what's going to happen when there's a suno for every aspect of life. So on one hand, yeah, it's kind of scary to think like, what's going to happen to all these musicians? What's going to happen to all of us? What's going to happen? Like, what's going to happen to music? What's going to happen to all these jobs? What's going to happen to all these artists? With the everything that goes around with this? And although it's scary, to me, it's actually less scary than Napster at the beginning of the millennium. And you might think that's crazy for me to say that. But too few people were affected in 2000 for anybody to give a shit. Now everybody's affected. So in my personal opinion, and this is just, I will say it's an ignorant, I think about this a lot, and it's still a new thing that we're all trying to process. But in my opinion, the faster everybody starts adopting all of these AI things, the faster that these industries, everybody is going to start feeling the impact, the faster we're going to have to make a decision as mankind and as humans and as society to do something about it and to figure it out. I think the worst possible thing that could happen is Suno has a slow build for the next 3 years, just taking out a few people at a time, having a few guys like me being like, fuck, what's the point? I guess I'm going to go do something else. Or having artists be like, what's the point? I'm never going to be able to make a living, making records. I'm not even going to bother trying. That's the worst thing that could happen, is if this is a slow thing. I had a conversation with somebody the other day and I said something, and again, take this with a grain of salt, take this with some nuance, take this with some context. I said, I hope the next year to 2 years, Suno takes over the music business and floods everything and is so overly saturated, and it is so impactful that we as an industry, as we as a society, as we as a species, and not when I say Suno, I'm meaning Suno, but for everything. Whatever it is in your industry, whatever the equivalent of Suno is for your industry or your parents' industry or your neighbor's industry, it needs to happen fast so it hurts. Because if it doesn't hurt, or if it's a slow build, nobody's going to ever care enough to do anything about it. And I know we're getting totally off topic here, and I feel like I'm getting in this is like 1984 going on in my brain. But it is crazy. But on one hand, it scares the shit out of me. And on the other hand, I'm glad that it's not just the music business this time, because nobody cared enough back then to really do something about it. Obviously, people did. Apple got the iTunes store going and kind of brought people back in, and the RAA was doing stuff. And there were advocacy things going on that at least put some money back into the business, where it could have just stayed Napster and LimeWire forever and been free. And then we would have, I don't know how that would have turned out. But we're all into this. Everybody, every single person on my street is going to be affected by this. And so we have to figure this out. And I'm not saying it needs to be necessarily like shut down. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying there's nothing good here. I think there could be, but I mean, man, there's so many less impactful things that get so much attention and regulation and guidelines and licensing and like all this shit that goes on a daily basis that you have to jump through hoops to like just, make happen. This should not be free game. Like there needs to be some, like, I don't know. There needs to be something that kind of gets this thing reined in a little bit. Or like I said, maybe it doesn't get reined in at all. Maybe this has just got to it's got to decimate everything for a short period of time so we can get past it and do it properly. I don't know. I don't want to go in this any further because it can start getting fucking dark. But I guess my point is, there was one other point I wanted to make actually when talking about the AI. Because I have had some experience with Suno and some of these other platforms, playing around with them myself, working with people who are using them as production tools, working with people who are relying on them entirely for writing now. And I will say this, something that I haven't heard anybody else talk about yet, but I think you guys have probably experienced this when you're making let's say you're writing a song, okay? And you go from having a song an idea in your head. Maybe it's just a line. Maybe it's a concept. Maybe it's a guitar riff. And when you get that to like the next step, so let's say you've got an idea in your head and you write a verse and then you put some chords to it and you're like, holy shit, like it starts sounding like something. You get that little bit of a high, right? You get that little bit of a rush. You're like, holy crap, I've got something here, right? Okay, so follow me. After you play that verse, I don't know, 20 times, 30 times, and you tweak it a little bit, and you tweak it a little bit, and you tweak it a little bit, the high starts to kind of taper off. But now you're getting to the chorus. And then you're like, fuck, this song, I think I got something here. Now you do the chorus. And you find a really great chorus, and you get that high again. And then you iterate on the chorus to make sure it's better. And then it kind of gets less high, kind of wears off a little bit. And then you get to the second verse and the whatever. Now you got the whole song and you get the high again. You're listening to maybe you did a demo or you just recorded on your iPhone and you're showing your friends and you get that. You're like, holy shit. And this wave of kind of little highs and lows, and then you build back up and you build back down, getting to the end of writing a song. And then when you get to the end of writing the song, you're like, oh, I can't wait to record this, right? And then maybe you do a demo, and when you plug the guitar in and you get the drums programmed, you're like, oh my God, this sounds great. And then you get to the end of doing the drum tracks. Now you're working on the guitars and you don't have that high from the drum tracks anymore. Now you're getting the high from the guitar, and everything kind of just the novelty of the new and the excitement of I just created this thing kind of has worn off a little bit. So there's all these ups and downs of getting it to the final stage. And while you've kind of come down from the writing part, because now you're onto the producing part or the demo part, you're not that excited about, you're not getting that same high from the second line in the verse that you did when you wrote it. Like, it's still good, but you're just not getting that feeling, that rush. You then, while you're doing the demo, you can be like, man, is that second line, is that as good as I thought it was? Maybe there's something better. And you get all these opportunities to get the high, come down off the high. You have to live with all your decisions without that kind of excitement and that first new novelty throughout the entire process. So by the time you get to the end, if you've got something, if you're still excited about that song and you're still getting the feelings from all the parts and all the lyrics and all those sounds and everything, you know you've got something pretty fucking good. The problem that I see, and I've seen this almost every single time somebody shows me something that they made with Suno, they'll be like, oh my God, I wrote this song. Check this. And they'll play it. And it sounds great. And it's got some cool stuff in it. And maybe even the lyrics are cool. And you listen down, maybe you listen a couple times, and then you move on. You haven't actually lived with that thing without the high of how fast that came together, because it's such instant gratification. It's almost like shocking to us that we can go from an idea to a finished mix in 4 minutes. It's crazy. So we're being influenced by how awesome that is. And so a lot of these things that we think are really awesome, I'm starting to wonder, I'm like, I don't know know if they're that awesome. I haven't lived with it long enough without that new novelty feeling to really be able to say how awesome this is. And I don't think the writers and the producers and everybody who are using these as tools, I don't know if they're getting the same objectivity and the same opportunity to iterate and make things better because they're skipping over all of the time and all of those steps that all that stuff would have been happening. And so I haven't heard a ton. I've heard a lot of really like, dude, check this out. Suno made this in 4 minutes. And you're like, holy shit. It's kind of like when, you've got a friend who's like, their kid is, plays guitar or something. You're like, dude, check out my son. He's great. He's 8 years old and he plays guitar. And you hear him play and you're like, yeah, you're pretty fucking good for an 8-year-old. I mean, if you were 20, you would be like, stop wasting my time. I'm not saying that's not a good thing, but it's kind of like I feel like we're hearing some of this stuff and we're being like, holy shit, this is great because it goes from 0 to 100 really fast. If we had to spend a week getting it to that same place, I don't think we would have been as happy with where it ended up. And so I'm hearing a lot of Suno generated or AI generated songs or AI generated productions that I'm just not that excited about. And it's not because I'm like poo-pooing the AI. Like it's not, I'm not really getting that precious with like, it needs to come from a human. Like, to be honest with you, I don't think people care about most of the things of when it comes to music, how it was done. Like you were talking about Korn recording on tape. If they think that people are going to give a shit about whether they recorded on tape or not, like, do it because you want to do it, or do it because you like the sound, or do it because it makes you not do 55 takes. Like, fine. But you're not going to sell a record because you told somebody like, oh, you did this on tape. Nobody cares. Like, that's not the answer here. I'm getting a little off kind of topic here, but anyways, that's my AI take. Like I said, I could talk about this for another hour. I think we're going to be talking about this for the next year, maybe 5 years. But I've been seeing a little bit of the chat kind of scrolling by. I'm just curious, kind of as I've been pontificating on the future of society, what everybody's been talking about here. So, oh man, non-creative tribute band punks that have never written a song in their entire life using Suno to generate songs. It's a crime against creativity. They're pretenders. It's a sham. Or not. I mean, I remember, even when, people found out that you could tune vocals, they'd be like, oh, those singers, you can't fucking sing. And it's kind of, that's not what it's about. It's about the song. It's about the emotion. It's like, I don't care if somebody had to go and tune the vocal. Like, I don't know. I think the problem is, I think we have to decide, like, we have to decide whether or not we're okay with consuming that. I mean, think about the food industry. I mean, there's some pretty bad shit that we consume on a daily basis. We've decided that that's okay. Mass production of, I don't know, pick a food has probably put a lot of people out of business. Farmers and, chefs and I don't know, like I'm a bad example, but we've decided as a society that like cheap garbage food that's easily accessible and we don't care where it came from or how it was made. We just care that it's in abundance and it's cheap and it's easy. That's more important than anything else. Like as like Western culture, that's a decision that a lot of us have made, including myself, like with a lot of things. We need to start like really taking this seriously and say, is this a decision? Is this something that we're going to be okay with? Because again, I think it's only a matter of time before Suno gets even better, and it's going to be pumping out stuff that's going to be like, wow, this is great. And it's not going to be great with the caveat, yeah, but it's not real. It's going to be like, I don't know, it makes me feel what music's supposed to do to me. Like I feel the song, I feel the lyric, I feel the beat, I feel like whatever, right? So I don't know. Yeah, I'm so mixed emotions on this. I don't even really know how to summarize kind of, I don't think it's, having to pay your dues and where does it come from and how was it made and stuff like that from a sense of what is coming out the speakers. I think what's coming out the speakers it can be very good with the AI stuff. I think it's a matter of like, we need to decide what's important to us and how we consume it. And if we decide as a society, or if we individually decide that's not right for us, I'm not listening to music on Suno. Like, so I don't go there for music. If people are taking Suno stuff and putting it onto Spotify or Apple Music or YouTube, and I happen to consume it there, and I'm like, oh, that sounds great. I really like that. So be it. I don't know how much that's happening yet, but it's definitely on the rise. It's crazy. It's happening faster than we think. My girlfriend is a physicist with a DOE, and the things she's told me are truly terrifying. Not talking crazy conspiracy stuff. Of course. I mean, listen, if this is what's happening with music, which is such, again, like I said, like this, it's almost like, I don't want to say it's not impactful, but it's like if this much resources are being put into making like songs, there wasn't a lack of songs. There was already too many songs. There was not enough good songs. There was already a lot of good songs and not enough ways to consume it. It's not like this is filling a need we've had for the last 10 years. And all of a sudden I was like, yay, finally, there's a lot more music for us to consume. So if this much attention and resources are being dumped into something that we don't even need, imagine what's going on with some of the other shit that's more profitable, that needs it more, like not always in a good way. Like that's when you want to scare yourself. Start thinking about that. But, oh my God, my head's exploding. Yeah. When mixing or maybe starting out mixing, is it better to mix band? Oh, we're taking a left turn. We're getting right back into mixing. I like it. Okay. Rip the Band-Aid right off. Okay. I like it. Thank you. No more AI talk for tonight. When mixing a band, starting out mixing, is it better to mix bands to your strengths, a band that hits your radar, or just hit the ground running, mix it all? Good question. I've always thought it, well, not always. I discovered maybe halfway through my career, if you want to set yourself up for success, do what you're good at and find people who like what you do. As simple as that sounds. That doesn't always work. Sometimes you got to pay your bills and there isn't anything happening except for, an artist who wants to hire you, and just because you're convenient, or because somebody said that you're reliable, or because they've heard something else that you did and they think maybe you can do what they do, even though it's not anything similar. Sometimes you got to do those. And sometimes those are the most like gratifying projects, when you take on something they're like, this is so out of my wheelhouse, and you pull it off, or you learn something different, or you fuck it up entirely. And then you have to like figure out, well, what could have I done better? And when you go and down that discovery rabbit hole, that's when you actually kind of grow as a professional. So, I would say if you've got the opportunities to do what you love, the style of music and that you love and that you're good at, and that you're working with the people and the artists and working on that they like what you do, I think you've got a better chance at just being successful, I guess, and fulfilled, and maybe, getting off to a better start. And then maybe if you want to start branching out and taking some risks and doing some other stuff, great. But on the same hand, I wouldn't get discouraged if you have to kind of get your feet wet with areas that you might, or genres, or styles that you're not necessarily the best at or the most kind of adept at. I think both. There's advantages in both. I think you just got to be aware of kind of what's going on in either scenario, and there's a lot of in the middle. There's a lot of gray area in that question, so that's great. Jordan, I'm not worked up. You haven't even seen me worked up. You want to see me worked up? Just kidding. I get worked up. And I think it's it's good. If you don't get worked up, I mean, man, like I said, I think for people to actually care, it's got to be polarizing one way or the other. They got to love it or they hate it. If they're just indifferent, that's the problem. And maybe that's a good way to summarize that Suno. If this is just kind of like, yeah, it's just one of those things. Yeah, you can use it. It's indifferent. I think that's almost more alarming than if it just blows up and everybody's using it and it forces the issue a little faster. I said I wasn't going to talk about AI anymore. You pulled me right back in. God damn it. Okay. Go back to my submissions here. Question is, how you use your sends, pre or post, particularly those to parallel compression distortion, when you've created a good balance to those parallel chains. If you want to automate your tracks, do you think that pre-fader mode is better in order to keep your balance to the mix? Thanks again for all the help and inspiration you provide. This is a good question. And it depends on what you're using it, what your parallel chains are doing, and how susceptible and they are to what they're doing changing based off of dynamics. So, for instance, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. So, for instance, let's say you're doing, I think like the most obvious way to play around with this is doing a parallel distortion. So, if you've ever put a distortion plugin on something that's quiet and then turned up the input into it, the sound changes drastically, right? As it starts getting more distorted and compressed and saturated, the sound starts changing. So if you've got a parallel channel and you're doing a bunch of rides on the thing that's feeding into the parallel channel, which is then affecting how it's sounding because it's getting less level, and you don't want that. You want that sound to stay constant. Then you would go pre-fader, and then you'd have to ride those two together. There are some scenarios where when the volume on the source track comes down, you don't want the distortion to be as gnarly. So that's a good thing. And in that scenario, you might do post-fader. So it kind of depends. And it also depends on how drastic your moves are. So where are you building all of your kind of dynamic stuff? So for instance, if I'm doing parallel compression on a vocal, I know a lot of guys who will do pre-fader, so that way the compressor on your parallel chain is not being influenced by your automation moves on, let's say, your main vocal. And that way the compressor's doing its thing the whole time, and then you're just mixing it in. But then when you're doing your overall volume automation, you either got to sum it down or you got to be aware of kind of where you're doing your kind of your volume rides. For me, I like, for the most part, I do a lot of post-fader parallel. And the reason why I do that is because I like to use my parallel lines as almost like I like to be able to push into them. So when I'm pushing something, it almost helps me kind of rein it in. And so this is you just got to experiment and find what works for you and your style. So for instance, like my parallel drum bus, if I turn my kick and my snare down, my kick and snare bus are not smacking like crazy anymore. It's actually like, it's almost like a more of just a kind of like a volume boost. But if I'm turning my kick and my snare down in the mix, I probably also don't want that really smacky sound. So for me, that's kind of how my brain works. If I want the smacky sound, I just want it to be quieter. Well, then I would still do my post, but I would bring the volume down instead of on the kick and the snare. I would bring the volume down on my subgroups. So it's a matter of your routing. You've got to figure out what works. I would experiment. And just because you do one thing one day doesn't mean you have to do that every time. There are some times where I will do pre-fader parallel compression. The vocal's a great example. If I've got a vocal sound that I just want to stay the same the whole time, and then I want everything to kind of automate after all those sounds being mixed, I'll do pre-fader and then automate all the returns. So just kind of depends. Good question though. A lot of people get confused with that. They're like, how do I do this post-fader? I see people do it post-fader, but doesn't that change the threshold of the compressor? And it's like, yeah, it does. But that's not always necessarily a bad thing. Super compressed sound doesn't have to stay that way the entire time. Sometimes that being dynamic against the not compressed line is sometimes the interplay between that. Sometimes that's what makes the kind of the magic of parallel compression or just parallel processing in general. No. What is your opinion on peak normalization in your session? Finding the single loudest peak in the audio and increasing the entire file's volume so that peak reaches a set limit, preventing clipping. I don't really necessarily do that per se, but I will, and my assistant will go through, and anything that is peaking too much will clip gain down, and everything that's really quiet, I'll clip gain up. I like the bulk of my level to kind of live in, here, I'll pull up a Pro Tools meter here. I like kind of my level to live in this kind of like -10 world. If the peaks go a little above that, that's fine. If kind of like the average of the signal is a little below that, that's fine. But I'll just clip gain up and down to kind of get it in that. I typically won't go through and like normalize to a certain level. Because also the problem with that is like especially with my workflow when I'm mixing for other people is most of the time they've got plugins on, or they've got a chain, or it's going into like a folder or an auxiliary track. And if I start changing the level too drastically, then it starts, changing the sound of what they gave me a little bit too much. So just going through blindly and just setting it all at the same level doesn't really work for my workflow. But I think it's good to, if you're recording or you're producing, it's good to have kind of a target for like where you want your signal to be. And then by the time you get to mix, it'll be very predictable. So good question. Dax, how would one reproduce the perceived heavy low-end guitar chugs palm mutes akin to the Black Album or any Nickelback album? Where a palm mute makes it sound like the speaker is going to blow up. Certainly a good balance of guitar and bass, but maybe some cab resonance or a well-placed room mic. More or less gain. Been experimenting with real amps, cabs, on how to get that tight thump onto tape. I mean, yeah, it's interesting because as I was reading that, I was thinking about how many like YouTube videos I've seen of people using multi-band compressors to get rid of that thump. It's funny. It's funny. It's like, the thing that everybody's trying to get rid of in mixing is the thing that sometimes we're going after while we're recording. And then we get to the mix and we're like, yeah, it doesn't quite work. Or maybe that's exactly what it needs. Or maybe it's just a taste thing. But I know what you're talking about. And I think it's a little bit more, I don't know. I don't think I'm super like conscious of going after that. it's definitely a frequency thing. To me, I mean, I've never been a big fan of room mics on heavy guitars. I know the Black Album, they did use them, and I know like some of my favorite records from that era use a lot of room mics on heavy guitars. I've just never been able to make it work to where it makes things better and not just more kind of like muffly and just kind of less defined. For me, it's just finding, to be honest with you, it might be finding the right combination of, guitar, amp, settings on the amp, speaker. It's a fine line between like being woofy and like kind of flubby and having that thump that you're talking about. And I think, honestly, that's why some amps and some speakers are so good, is because they can reproduce that and make that work better than others. And some just simply can't. I don't have a really great answer for that. It is a great question. To me, it's just a lot of trial and error. And if I'm going after that, if I really want that to be a thing, here's a production technique. It's not really giving you the technical answer of how to get it with a guitar. But sometimes I'll just overdub a layer of just the palm mute spot. So let's say the riff was bump a dump bump a dump bump a dump whatever, like that. I might just do the boom 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 on a separate track on a quad, and then mix that in, and so it gives the impression that those palm mutes are jumping out of the speaker. And it's not that they're jumping out, they're just getting louder. But sometimes doing that can be a little production technique to fake that, I guess. Something I'm going to play around with a little bit. I have an idea that I've been thinking about that would help kind of what you're talking about, but it's probably a year down the line. Can't tell you, man. I can't tell you. Okay, Kyle, what's up, buddy? Is Kyle in the chat here? Let me have a look at the chat before I jump into this. Looks like there's a bunch of questions in here. Okay. Question. Okay. All right, cool. All right, let's dig into this. Kyle, what's going on, buddy? Hope you're still here. Hope you're doing well. There you go. My theme for 26 is not a word, but a phrase that kind of goes along with your idea of focus. You can do anything, but you can't do everything. The mindset of being practical or efficient. Love that, buddy. I love that. I really do love that. That's kind of one. There's one that's been floating around saying you can have it all, just not at the same time, and I kind of like that. Similar kind of thing, but I love that. Can you shed a little light on your songwriting ground zero template, like song idea from scratch and aiming at how that progresses into the badass Baseford end result that we've come to know and love? From a technical standpoint, I do have like I've got a Pro Tools template that I've got kind of Superior Drummer set up with a big kit that sounds good. I've got a bass, Trillion bass that I can program with MIDI. I've got a bunch of like percussion loops, tambourines, shakers, just some kind of like almost like lo-fi kind of loops, break beats and stuff like that. Grooves. I've got guitar lines set up with clean amps, with dirty amps, with some kind of like delay, kind of ambient shit. I've got that stuff set up, ready to go, so that whatever you're working on, you can quickly lay an idea down and not get stuck on kind of the sound. You can always go back and refine it and redo it and change it and all that stuff. But from a philosophical standpoint, my philosophy on kind of a songwriting thing is to make sure the technical stuff does not get in the way of the creative stuff. Hence, having all that stuff set up ready to go. I've found sometimes even the process of having to set up a track and to set up a sound then takes my focus. Like, I want to get the perfect sound. Whereas if I've got something that I plug into and it's already kind of like halfway there, then I'm okay with that. And so I would make sure that you mentioned template, and I interpret that initially as technical template, and I can open that up and on another live stream, and we can kind of dig into that, and I can post that for you guys to have. But for the most part, I think the template is figuring out your workflow and your process to get the technical stuff out of the way, and just let the creative aspect of producing and writing that song be the focus. Yeah, that's a very important thing. And I think sometimes, some of the people that I work with, that's one of the things that they would say that they do appreciate when we're working on a new song is like, there's no like, okay, I want to do a heavy guitar. Okay, let me go set that up. It's like, okay, plug in, go. Like, sometimes I'm handing them the cable before they're, even have the guitar in their hand. And as soon as they sit down, there's something that's close enough to get the idea down, and we can always go back and do it later. So, question 2A, you mentioned at one point in your journey into becoming more of a mixing engineer, like the early stages, there were some unknown bands or artists that you mixed for. Would you mind being, I think that's supposed to say vulnerable, and sharing some of your progression from your earliest, maybe not so good mixes to the, hey, I got this, onto some of your most proud, iconic works? No, I've shut those out of my memory, and as far as I'm concerned, they don't exist. I've never done a bad mix. Just kidding. There's lots of them. I'd have to probably go dig through the archives a little bit, but that would be a fun experiment to go back and pull up some of those mixes. I'd have to probably pull up some old hard drives and, even look at, iTunes or Apple Music and just kind of see what came out, what didn't come out, and all that stuff. But, I mean, to be honest with you, I think as human nature is to almost try to like forget about the ones that weren't great. Like I'm trying to think of something that I'm like, oh yeah, that wasn't good. I mean, there was a couple things I did. There was a couple things I did that I listened back to. And I'm like, yeah, that's not great. I don't know if I'm vulnerable enough, if I'm comfortable enough with the vulnerability to say them out loud. Maybe we can have this conversation offline one day. The band you did the live mix session for was more independent, unknown, and we would be less likely to hear and know why it sounded so good. I would love to have a list of all the things you've done that you care to share in a chronological order to hear your progression. Interesting. Okay. That could be something. I mean, if you went and looked at my discography, you could probably put that together yourself. But yeah, there's definitely some things on there that either never, discographies aren't always complete, or all music stuff's not always accurate. And, sometimes, like I said, there are projects I forget about, and sometimes stuff just never comes out. Like there's been a lot of stuff I've mixed, especially early for smaller bands, that just like either never came out or was a very limited release, and maybe the band broke up before, Spotify was a thing, and then nothing ever got uploaded. Like there's a lot of that stuff. I went looking for a song the other day from a band I mixed in 2009, 2008, 2009. I can't find it anywhere, but it was out. It was out at one point. Like I think I've got a disc of it, but I can't find the albums anywhere. So there are definitely those. So yeah, maybe we'll dig into those. I'll have to put that on the kind of the to-do list, because I feel like that would be a little bit of jogging the old memory. There was a song you did for Avril. You mentioned that she was needing a skater boy kind of vibe. You guys laid out guitar and then kind of weren't feeling it. So you worked on building a song with the idea, and when they heard it again, they were like, yes. What song was that? And what came of that session for you? So that was a song called Ain't Seen Nothing Yet, and that was on, I think, her self-titled album. And to be honest, like, what came out of that session for me, I think, was potentially maybe that record is when me and Chad started working together. Me and Chad started working together a lot on that record. I'd worked with him before on a few things, but that's when we were in the same studio together for, a month. They were going to make a Nickelback record after that. So I think I probably would have been brought on to go and help record that. I think what that song did was a little bit of a kind of like, oh, you also produce kind of thing. It's not just I'm a tracking and editor guy. So I would say again, there's lots that led up to that, but that was a moment where I think there was a little bit of a fork in the road of, am I only going to get hired with this camp as only an engineer, or am I now kind of open to be more creatively involved? And I think that was like a little bit of a, like, not proving myself, but it was kind of like, oh shit, okay, he can do that too. Which is the stuff that I really liked doing as well. And so I was, definitely wanting to do more of that. And that kind of provided that opportunity. So yeah, good question. Jesse, I think I've got two. Oh no, I've got a bunch more. I gotta knock through these. Jesse, when you're involved in pre-production and tracking a project, how much of that final mix sound are you chasing while recording the tracks? Has your tracking process evolved to capture the performance well and cooking it later into a DAW? Or do you cook it in on the way in on the console or preamps old school style? So ever since I started, it's been going after the sound as close as I can get without holding up the session. Because obviously at some point you need to start recording. But as technology has evolved, I'm still trying to get there as quickly as I can, but I'm also keeping in the back of my head, I don't want to do something that's going to make facilitating the sound in my head later harder. So for instance, if I'm dealing, let's say drums for an example. If I'm dealing with a project that I know, I know it's going to be heavily sampled, and very compressed and just that kind of thing. I'm still going to try to get the drums sounding as good as they can, but I'm probably not going to overly compress anything because I know that cutting triggers after the fact is going to be difficult because I just smashed the transient. But I'll still make everything sound as good as I can, but I just might not go after the finished sound knowing that I'm never going to get there. I might do a few other things to facilitate the kind of the post-production, if you will. So, Dolph, what are your top 3 reference mixes, both your own and that someone else mixed? Oh man, what an amazing question. Okay, so I'll give you the quick answer on other people's mixes. I try to go and listen every few months. I'll just go through Apple Music and I'll listen to kind of like new stuff, old stuff, just everything. And I'll almost kind of come to a new top 3 every few months. And like the ones that I did last time, I didn't even know some of the bands. Like it was that like I'm like, oh, that sounds good. That sounds good. And I'll just use them. For me, a big challenge is separating the sonics from the song. So there are certain songs that I love, and I love the mixes for those songs, but the sonics of that mix has nothing to do with what I do, and it has nothing to do with maybe the project that I'm working on. So I've actually got in my list of live stream topics, I've got like a reference, just how to use references, how to pick references, what to listen for in references. I'll dig into that a little bit further because there's no top three. A couple mixes that I've done that I reference on my own quite a bit for different reasons. And again, there's a reason why I reference. I don't just reference for the sake of referencing. But there's a couple Nickelback songs, obviously. There's a song off the last record called Skinny Little Missy. That's kind of like a slow, kind of heavy plodding rock song that's kind of my that's kind of my low end, like how like boomy can I get without it being obnoxious? And that's kind of one of the limits for me on that. There's a Daughtry song that Artificial was a really, I think that mix, I don't know what happened. I can't quantify how that mix came together, but it somehow did. That one just has a thing to it that I'm just like, I don't know if I could replicate that again. But something happened in that mix that just really worked. And I reference that a lot for just kind of like how hyped and compressed and big and just like over the top. It's funny that the song's called Artificial. How artificial can I make something? And that's kind of the edge for that. Really quickly, for me, when I'm listening to stuff or when I'm referencing things, a lot of it is kind of using references to find the boundaries. How far can I go with something? And so a lot of my references are like, songs that have bottom end, and be like, if this has any more bottom end, and if my mix has any more bottom end than this mix, it's going to be too much. So I found that limit. I found the edge of that kind of that box, right? Same with top end. I've got some mixes that I reference for top end, or I'm always listening when I'm picking new references for something that I know is really bright. And I'm like, anything brighter than that, it's going to be a no go. And so I'll use that as my reference for that. Same with like sibilance, same with mid-range, same with snare vocal level. Like I'm using references to find almost my limits for all the various things. And that's kind of how I use references. So we'll dig in on that. I think it's a really great topic that a lot of people reference. We all use references, and I think sometimes people don't know exactly how to use them, and sometimes I don't. But I think it would be a good discussion that we'll do in a whole other live stream. So, can you explain and show how you use your buses for the different food groups, not only drums but vocals, guitars, etc.? Yeah, I can show that really quickly. I've done that in my last live stream when I did set up my my mix template. I really go into detail, but it's no different. All my key, I don't have vocals in this session right now, but all my keys go to a keys bus. My guitar, I got 2 different guitars. I got bass, I got percussion, I got drums. The only real difference is with my drums, I'm almost always using my parallel buses. Where with everything else, I just have them kind of inactive, ready to go in case I want to use them. So it's more of that's kind of the difference. But I basically route every track in through that bus. And then sometimes I put some bus processing on it. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes there's a parallel going on. Sometimes there isn't. But it's basically, I've got my 8 food groups, which then have VCAs attached to them. And again, part of the reason for the subgroups is for those layers of saturation and those layers of processing. And each one of these subgroups goes out into my summing amp as well. So that gives me another layer of kind of saturation. So Hopefully that's a quick answer. If you really want to dive in, go back to the last live stream, the one where I did the mix template, where I talk a little bit more about setting that up. Okay, last question from the submission, and then I'm going to do a quick scan of the chat, and then I'm going to go eat dinner because I haven't eaten anything all day, and I'm dying. Would love to hear you talk about blending, layering amps for heavier guitar tones. What do you look for? How much gain and quad tracking? Okay, cool. We talked about quad tracking. We talked a little bit about layering, and not to point you back to another live stream, but instantly I started thinking about the live stream that I did for the Theory of a Dead Man song that I produced, the Living My Life Like a Country song. And I opened up that session and we dug into that. And there was a lot of comments about the guitar, how many guitars there were, and the layering, and why there were so many guitars, and how they were layered, and the different sounds. When I'm blending guitar amps, so if I'm recording and I've got multiple guitar amps going on at the same time and I'm blending them together and then I'm printing that, each one is doing something different. There's not a lot of redundancy. And same with layering. When I'm layering guitar parts or tones, obviously it's like, yeah, there's a distorted guitar and a distorted guitar together, but they both serve a purpose. And for me, it's, let's say one of three things, that I'm going after. Articulation. So I might do a layer that is giving me additional articulation over top of like the main sound. And when I say articulation, like just being able to hear the part clearer. It doesn't have to necessarily be cleaner. It just has to be more articulate. Size. It's just feeling big and feeling a little bit blown out. I might do another layer, or I'll pick a different sound to get that. Something to be maybe a little bit just messier and more chaotic, and just a little bit almost. I wouldn't want to say the opposite of articulation, because I still want to be able to hear the part, but something where articulation's not what I'm after. I'm just looking at, maybe something that's fuzzier. Maybe that's something more distorted. Maybe that's something a little bit more scooped and just makes things go, and then the third thing that I might go specifically after when I'm layering or blending, if I'm wanting something aside from just an overall kind of cool tone, is a specific frequency that I'm looking to fill. So for instance, we made the analogy, or we were talking about the example earlier of like, if your main guitar tone is kind of scooped because at the beginning of the process, there wasn't a lot else going on in the mix. And then by the time you get to the end of the production, that guitar is a little less defined, or I've got other parts going on, maybe some keys going on, maybe the drum samples are now doing a different thing frequency-wise, and the vocals are in the background vocals, and there's kind of a frequency that I need a guitar to kind of fill in. Sometimes doing that with EQ isn't the right move. Sometimes that's picking an amp, or doing an additional layer, or doing a reamp and adding a different blend, where you can find an amp that just kind of has a character, has a voice that fills that void. And so those are kind of like the three kind of boxes that I'll check off, or at least the considerations I'll make when I'm looking for another amp to blend in, or if I'm going to actually layer another guitar part on top. It's usually to kind of achieve one of those three things. So another great question. Thank you. Okay, let's go to the chat. If you've put a question in the chat that hasn't got answered yet, just dump it in again, and I'll scan it here. I always like making this sound when I'm looking through the chat, so that way there's no awkward silence. Okay, I'm gonna sit in the awkward silence right now. This is really uncomfortable. Super uncomfortable. Bass Chrisford. That's fucking funny. I've never heard that one before. Oh, the one that I got when I was younger, and I use this for a business name, is treble Chevy. So obviously the opposite of bass is treble, and the opposite of Ford is a Chevy. So yeah, treble Chevy. I've never heard the bass Chrisford before. That's fucking great. I love that. Okay, more awkward silence while I read these. Okay, I got one. Ever have a singer, songwriter, artist do everything to a click track and have a drummer put down tracks last? Yeah, that happens all the time. I mean, I'm usually not having the band play to a nothing or a click track. We'll have programmed drums. I'd say most of the productions, I'd say most of like these modern productions that we hear that aren't like a whole band playing together at the same time, sometimes the drums are the last thing to go on. I think that's more common than you think. The first time I did that was actually like 20, probably 20, close to 25 years ago. We used to do that. Tommy Lee used to love doing that because he would be able to hear the whole song and hear the production and be able to play to that. And he could, play drum fills that matched, other stuff that was going on, or he would be able to, really be able to play like the kick drum off the vocal syncopation and stuff like that. So we used to do that a lot. Even if he laid down a scratch drum take, and his scratch drum take was already pretty awesome. But a lot of the time we would go in and punch in drums like at the end, like the song would basically almost be mixed. Yeah. So even today, like I said, a lot of the times, the drums are being added at the very end. So yeah, it's crazy. Question: what is in your opinion, your best mixed record song so far? Wow. I don't know. I'm pretty self-critical. Every time I listen to something I've done, I'm like, oh God, that's terrible. Maybe not terrible, but like I'll definitely poke holes in it. So, yeah, San Quentin. I mean, I have a hard time saying it's that one because I feel like I don't want to say that song mixed itself because it definitely didn't. Like I'd almost say like production wise, that was one of my better productions simply because of, it worked. The mix wasn't easy, but I don't know. When I listen to that song, I don't hear like a really challenging mix. I don't know. Maybe that's the sign of a good mix is when it sounds like it was effortless. So yeah, that's got to be up there. I'd say that's definitely one that I get a lot of comments on, and I get a lot of people saying, "Oh, I use that as a reference" and stuff like that. So, yeah, that's got to be up there. Yeah. Have I recorded my new Friedman Jose amp? I actually have. I've been doing some more stuff with the Theory of a Dead Man guys. We've got a new project. I don't know when it's planned on coming out. We're still have a little bit of work to do on it, but the last batch of songs, it was kind of the main sound. It was all over that. It sounds so good. It's really, really, really a great amp for just a Marshall, but more bigger, just, yeah, it's great. It's great. Really, really digging it. Yeah. Do you have a voltage regulator in your studio? Awesome question. I do. I've got a Furman AR-15, which is like an old It's like an older voltage regulator. And then I also have a UPS that has like, I can't remember what they call it. It's not a regulator, but it like it takes I think it takes the power and it kind of creates a new line from that that's very steady. The other thing that I actually just bought, and it hasn't shown up here yet, is I bought one specifically for my guitar amps. I think the company's called Amp RX, and it's a big rack mount unit that I can plug in, I think like 4 or 6 amps into, and you can set it at whatever the voltage you want, and it will show you kind of what's coming in, and it will regulate what's going out. So I'm excited to get that and have all my heads running off of that. So interesting question. I like that. You've said there was an artist that you mixed that used programmed drums, and understand that they won't say the name, but can you share what program expansion did they use? Some of it I don't know. Some of it just shows up and it's printed, and so I don't know. I mean, I know I've mixed stuff that's had Superior Drummer on it. I know I've mixed stuff that's had the GGD drum packs. If somebody's programmed drums, I always have them bounce out. Like if we're doing programmed drums, I have them bounce out all the different tracks and print it for me, and then give me a MIDI track. And so I might use the MIDI track to then trigger maybe some different cymbals, or to trigger some room mics, or to do other stuff. But a lot of the time, the only way I know it's programmed is because there's no bleed, or there's no leakage, or the hits are the same, or they've told me, or I can see the routing or something like that. But yeah, it's all over the map. So whatever sounds good. So, okay. All right. I think that wraps us up. That was fun. No more live streams till the end of the year. And my first couple weeks in January are already pretty slammed. So we're probably going to be looking at the best case scenario mid-January for the next one. I've got a list of topics. I'll figure it out, but definitely feel free to send me a message if you've got any ideas, something that's been kind of, burning a hole in your brain that you want a full live stream on. We did come up with a couple things tonight that I think would be really great. As always, I appreciate everybody tuning in, all the support this year. I haven't done as many live streams as I've wanted. But the ones that I've done, you guys have been awesome watching and commenting and chatting and doing all the stuff that kind of keeps me motivated to do these. So I really appreciate that. If I could please ask a favor for anybody who didn't get kind of the housekeeping at the beginning, go sign up for my newsletter on my website. It usually just goes out once a week, and there's some goodies. We've got a plan for more goodies coming up. I know I keep saying that, but I promise there's going to be some more stuff that you guys can download, some freebies there, and just even to kind of stay in the loop on what's going on with, like I said, the course coming out, these live streams. It's just a quick and easy email that I send out every week, and it lets me know that when I see people subscribe, it lets me know that you guys care about what I'm doing here. So. Click the subscribe button in YouTube here if you're not already subscribed, and follow me on Instagram or TikTok or wherever you like to consume your social media. And hope everybody has a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, be safe, enjoy the time that you guys get. If you're taking a vacation, going to visit family, whatever it is that you guys are doing, have a great time. All the best at the beginning of the new year. Happy New Year, 2026. I think it's going to be a very interesting but fun, exciting, hopefully prosperous year for us all. So thank you again. I appreciate all of you very much. And until next time, happy holidays. Happy New Year.